Hello, everybody. This is the Bass Nerds, and I am Jody, and I am here with Mark, and we have a very special guest, Mr. Jauqo III-X. And we're happy to have him here. You have a huge... I've known you for many years. I know Mark has known you for many years, and you've had some incredible stories that I've heard firsthand. Some I've read on Facebook. You have a big network of friends around here. So I don't know where to begin this podcast, but I think we should just start with like when you started playing bass, how you got started, and what inspired you to pick up the instrument in the first place.
Wow. The basics of all that is, it basically came down to two things. The neighborhood I grew up in,
Okay.
in the household. My mother, she was hardcore about the Motown and the blues, and my father was hardcore about the jazz, like a lot of the straight ahead bebop, and he had hundreds, if not thousands, of albums.
Holy moly!
Yeah, and I would put the albums on, like Earl Father Hines, Miles Davis,
Yeah.
all of that. And my father had all of it. The Tijuana Brass, Herb Albert.
Oh yeah.
And I would read the credits or just read what was on the back of the cover.
Right.
Oh, the album covers. And it was something about that, the bass. Now, I was young. This was before I actually picked up the instrument, but it was something about that pulse. And I would just get more and more reading about it. And as time went on, we ended up living in this apartment building. And it was a group of guys who lived in the building. We were living on the first floor. They were living on the second floor. They had a band. And to be young, to hear that, and they would rehearse in the apartment where they lived, and they would raise the windows up because it would be hot in the summertime,
Right.
and this music would go all over the neighborhood.
How old are you at this point?
Maybe 14, 15.
Okay.
And I knew the guys, and about 16 years old, I decided I want to play bass. And I was getting more and more into it. And the neighborhood that I grew up in, it was musicians everywhere.
What neighborhood was that?
During that time, I was living in Chicago on 47th and Prairie.
Okay, so like near Hyde Park.
Yeah, near Hyde Park. Yeah, but
like
not Hyde Park.
Bronzeville.
It's Bronzeville. Definitely, it's Bronzeville.
Beautiful architecture down there, man.
Oh yeah, it's great history, a lot of history, especially with the arts.
Yeah.
And like everywhere you go, there was musicians. And during that time, young musicians were nurtured, and the older musicians would take you under their wing and just talk to you about the instrument that you choose to play, and just about music and about players. And it was like just bass players everywhere.
Right.
I mean, and one of the first things that was instilled in me, I don't know if it was just natural or just the groove. This was before bass has become what it is today, which is interesting in itself. But you just can never abandon the groove.
Right.
And that's what a lot of cats would talk to me about. Anyway, I have to say this. It's six bass players, other than a few collateral damage bass players here and there, but it was six bass players that really, really, really had an impact on me as a bass player, even to this day.
Yeah.
That was James Jamerson, Chuck Rainey.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Ralph Armstrong. It's just the thing with Ralph, his bass lines, the way he would drive the songs.
Right.
Literally, it's like a Mack truck, just the way he would drive, and he would direct the traffic.
Yeah.
And he just stood out, and not just as a groover, but as a soloist. To me, he was even. He was like equally left and right-handed, because he was able to do these great grooves, and his solos was just like, wow, the icing on the cake.
Right.
And the other bass player, Doug Wimbish.
Right.
I first saw Doug Wimbish when he first went out on he went out on tour with George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic.
Right.
And I had just started playing bass, as a matter of fact, and they come rolling through Chicago. So me and my friends go to the concert, and I was fresh. I didn't know a lot of the players, who they were, or anything like that. And this guy walks out on stage. The Sugar Hill Gang was opening up for Parliament Funkadelic.
Bet that was a great show.
Was Chip in the band at that point?
No.
Chip Sharon?
No, it was Doug Wimbish. Chip wasn't playing like on the live stuff.
Yeah,
on that particular concert he wasn't.
Yeah.
But Doug walked out by himself. I didn't know who he was at the time.
Okay.
But this guy walks out with a bass in his hand by himself, and he kicked the show off.
Damn.
And he killed it. And I have to give Doug. Doug is he's a good friend of mine. He's my big brother. I have to give him props because what a lot of cats are doing today, Doug was doing it then.
Yeah.
Seriously. He walked out and
Shredding.
he was killing. And I was like,
Right.
man, who is this dude? And I didn't find out who he was until years later, but he did his thing and he killed it. The other bass player that had a huge impact on me was Jauqo III-X. And most people are familiar with him, his work with Ornette Coleman, but he has an incredible body of solo work, and he has one of the most original voices on bass guitar since the inception of the instrument. And Jauqo, he just is the man.
Yeah.
Beautiful spirit, great guy. We're regularly in touch, even to this day. I have to say this in regard to Jauqo. I used to call him from prison.
Okay. Oh, we'll get into some prison
Oh,
talk
yeah.
here too.
I used to call him from prison. And the other guy that had a huge impact on me, Bernard Edwards
Dang.
from
Nice.
Chic.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, you hear none of that in my playing. None of those guys in my playing because I come from a school. Yeah, it's about individuality.
Right.
That's the school I come from. But Bernard Edwards, when Chic first came along, I kind of was just starting
Right.
playing.
Some of the most iconic bass lines
man,
ever.
that dude, and even to this day, Bernard Edwards still does not get his props.
Yeah.
But those are the 6 bass players.
I gotta stop you there. I think
Yes,
he's starting to like, and a lot of it has to do with like the advent of social media and how accessible
yeah.
everything is, and you could see all of those old solos and like
killing.
him in 1979
Right.
just opening up the show and just thumping, like his ability to thump.
He
And
had
it touches on what you said earlier too, like the ability to drive.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of those bass players that you name, they have that ability, or have that ability to drive the band almost as the director.
Yeah.
I think that's the mark of a really good bassist.
No,
in my
I
opinion.
agree. I agree with you because like my whole thing with groove, like part of my concept of groove is first hold things together.
Right.
I don't care how you feel. You just gotta work it with your body to keep it solid, like a brick wall, and just do what you do, but never abandon that groove and the pocket, which are 2 different things. It's misconceptions about the pocket and the groove is the same thing. Those are 2 different
Well,
things.
define those. Like, what's the difference between pocket and groove?
Well, the pocket holds it together.
Right.
Groove is the feel.
The thing you're holding together, perhaps.
Okay, you got the pocket. The pocket sets it,
Okay.
but the groove, it's like the little percolator. It's like the little engine
Okay.
that
Yeah,
kind
yeah, I
of pushes
see
the
what you're saying.
groove.
Yeah.
Right.
You slow down. About to hit a deer. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's that little push that's helping the groove do its thing.
Yeah.
Because if you take away the groove,
Then you just have a solid pocket, which only can last you so long.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I feel like pocket is more like interpersonal. Like you establish a pocket with other people, whereas the groove like just kind of presents itself.
no, that's the whole thing. That's what I said. The pocket, it has its own existence. Both of them have their own existence. They're equally different, but they're related. But you have to make them related.
Yeah.
You can't just be like. That's why you have some guys who they have nothing. They have no pocket or no groove.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes to like how things are taught, how you feel naturally. Because I think like with the groove and the pocket, you can discuss it. You can say what your interpretation of those things are, but at the same time, it comes down to that other ingredient, which is individuality.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of bass players, I'm gonna say bass players because that's what we play. We all play bass.
Right.
I think a lot of bass players, part of that problem is they are afraid to be themselves. They don't even know how to be themselves, and they choose to be. They want to be accepted, so they'll learn their favorite bass player's bass line to get into the acceptance club.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you take all of that and start dismantling it, most of those bass players won't have nothing.
Well, I mean, I feel like I think it's probably something that most bass players struggle with. Certainly I have struggled with, where like, you know, there's been moments in my life where I thought I was the shit and I could lick and play and
Right.
whatever, and then all of a sudden someone came along and made me look like a chump, or I thought I had an identity I was going with, and then all of a sudden I stumble on this guy on YouTube named Mono Neon who is
Oh,
doing
yeah.
shit on bass that my brain is having a hard time comprehending, and all of a sudden, like, no, I want to be more like that guy, or or guys like Damian Erskine, who's
Right.
doing a lot of chorded stuff, and then all of a sudden, I'm trying to like expand my horizons and trying to, steal some of their licks, steal some of their stuff, and I think that's what ends up making your own signature sound. Is that I'm a little bit of this guy, I'm a little bit of that guy, and I think it's really hard to like be 100% unique.
I don't know. I look at a player. I look at both of those players both of those examples, and
Right.
I see both of them just abandoning that and just be like,
This
I'm gonna
is what I do.
I'm gonna do what my body tells me to do,
Right.
And that this is who I am. Like that.
Sure.
That's the thing about like their identity. They're genuine. Like both of those
Sure.
cats are very genuine in what
Oh,
they
yeah.
do, and you can hear like, you listen to a song, like you can pick apart like if both of those players, and a roster of other musicians played a song and they both played it, you could tell like a very noticeable difference. It's all based on their style.
Well, yeah, definitely. Like people, you hear a Mono Neon track, that's him. You hear a
Right.
Damien track, that Jauqo, that's him. You hear Jody, and you go, well, he kind of sounds like Damien. He kind of sounds like this guy.
Yeah.
He kind of sounds,
That's
I
not
don't.
bad.
That's not bad, and I'm still developing my sound, and the argument of like playing for the song versus, like. I think there's a constant struggle between playing what's right for the song and like stepping out, and leading the song. So
Right.
you're always in that constant
Yeah.
like back and forth of like doing too much or too less, or
Yeah.
like trying to play to the song, or in a lot of cases, you're a bass player in a band of 5 people, which means you need to take up 20% of the sound,
Right.
and so you're trying to balance that with a room full of 4 other musicians who have their own egos and their own ideas of what things should sound like. So unless you're Jimi Hendrix and the Jimi Hendrix Experience and you're going to follow my lead, it's hard to be the signature sound within a band context,
One of the ways a bass player can create their individuality
Right.
is they first have to know the history of the instrument.
Sure.
See, if you don't know the history of the players, you kind of got your back up against the wall. But one of the things a person can do, if the bass player know the history of their instrument, like the players, the people who came before them and doing their thing today,
Right.
it will help them create their individuality, because if they are honest within themselves and if they play something that they can say they've heard it before,
Mhm.
don't play it.
Right.
That's a way you can develop your own thing, but you have to know the history of the players
right.
that excuse me, that take you to different levels. So if you're playing a bass line, you say, "Nah, this sounds like Stanley Clarke."
Right.
Just don't play that bass line no more.
Right.
But again, cats want to be accepted, because I'm speaking from experience. You can be as individualistic as you think you are, but it can also alienate you, because listeners, the human brain, it
Likes-
gravitates to what it's used to hearing.
Familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Something
right.
that's
So
familiar.
if something sounds a little different, cats be like they're not feeling it, or for whatever.
Right.
But that's because they're not aware of how programmed they have become.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's like with Jauqo Pastorius, great bass player, of course, but at the end of the day, you have so many other cats who chose to really sound like him,
Right.
and that's kind of like
And none of them really did it.
no.
Nobody like I've never really heard someone who sounds exactly like him. And the same goes for players like Marcus Miller
Right.
and Victor Wooten. There's people who have the chops, who are capable of playing those things, but the anatomy is different. I think the closest I've ever heard anyone actually sound like Jauqo is his son Felix.
Right.
And I think that's an anatomical thing. I think it's the
There-
anatomy and the way
And
that
it's
he plays.
still different. I think he's
It is
still,
still very
yeah,
different,
yeah,
yeah.
You know.
definitely. But there's a bass player, his name escapes me, but the album is a drummer named Brian Melvin.
Okay.
he put an album out, and I think the bass player, I don't remember his name,
Right.
but he's the only bass player that I've heard that sounds exactly like Jauqo Pastorius.
Yeah.
And
Well, is
he
that
was
a-
a young guy too that recorded on that album. I don't know if he's on the whole album, that particular album, but he
Sure.
was on some tracks and he was killing.
Right.
You
Well, I
know?
mean, if you got chops to, even to be compared to someone like Jauqo is
Right.
like
Yeah.
an honor, is got to say
see-
a lot
but
to
see-
who he is.
If someone says to me, and I'm gonna be honest,
Mhm.
man, you sound like Stanley Clarke. That's an insult to me.
But
But that's just me.
But it's not meant to be an insult. You got to consider
It's not
the
meant
source,
to be an
right?
insult, but maybe my word, I'm using it. I'm being a little harsh with that word.
Sure.
Maybe not insulting, but like, damn, you know, that's
Well,
not what I was going
no,
for.
to me, if someone says you sound like blah blah blah, it's kind of like I take it as like I'm not even trying to sound like that. I mean, sometimes people want to compliment you, so they'll say certain things.
Right.
But I'm not that guy.
Sure.
You know,
But it's
not-
also an
I
when
don't want-
someone says something like that to you, like, oh, you sound like a Stanley or whatever, I think they're also trying to relate to you and go like, I know the lingo
And I
too.
agree with you. Yeah,
know?
Yeah,
that's
and
what
that-
some of that is
and
from.
they have kind of like most of the time they have a little bit of a limited scope of musicians. Like someone
Right.
saying that's just like what I think what they're trying to say is that you've got chops. Like
Right.
you've got that, like your chops are impressive. And the first person who comes to mind to them is a name like Stanley.
And that's
Right.
something I had to learn with people. It's like I remember one time I did this performance with this group, and I felt that I didn't bring my A game.
Sure.
And so the older guy that was on the gig, he said something to me that I carry with to this day. He said, well, you may have felt that you weren't doing your best, but you touched someone in the audience.
Right.
I was like, yeah, you know what? Thank you, old man. And that made so much sense.
Right.
Because it's like I have friends who toured with Michael Jackson, and they would tell me how they would be practicing, like the dance routines he would be doing.
Yeah.
Right.
He get, when they do it live in front of an audience, sometimes he would mess up. He would be so bummed out about it, and someone had to say to him, "But the audience don't know the routine."
Right. They don't.
But
know
he
what
knew
you're-
the routine, so
Right.
he was, he would be kind of, and I understand that because you do what you do, and you want to give your best, and then you feel you didn't. It makes you feel kind of like, oh man.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
certainly your own worst critic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Someone hearing your original music for the first time might not know that chord change that you messed up because they've never heard
Right.
it before, right?
I want to.
Unless they're Jeff Berlin. He'll
Oh yeah, I want to take a moment to my experience with first hearing Chuck Rainey,
Okay.
and it was not Steely Dan.
Okay.
For me, it wasn't Steely Dan. That came a little later. It was I would hear all these particular songs, and I would be like, "Who is this bass player?"
Right. Back before YouTube,
Right.
and Google,
And so I started
and all that.
like digging around. And who is this bass player? And it was usually Chuck Rainey.
Yeah.
And I was like,
he's that bass player.
yeah.
Like every time you hear a track, it's like, man, who is
Him
that bass player?
or Pino, right?
Yeah, he's another one. Yeah.
He's another one. And he's kind of out of that school a little bit. Pino, he gets it. I mean, of course he gets it, but yeah, Chuck is he's the coolest dude.
Right.
He's like, Chuck told me one time, he said he's a student of the bass.
Okay.
That's Chuck Rainey talking about he's a student of the bass. And that's profound.
Even to this day.
Yeah, because he helped write the book of modern electric bass.
Right.
And he's the coolest dude. He's of course a wealth of wisdom.
Brilliant storyteller.
Yeah, Chuck is the man, and I got a lot of love and respect for Chuck. And Chuck is cool. But that was my whole thing with Chuck before I even knew who Chuck Rainey was. Because when you're young, you don't know who these people are.
Right.
Like I was studying upright, and I would be like, "Who is this?" It was this, George DeVivier, Leroy Jenkins.
Mitu, what's his name? Is he Serbian? He did that stuff with he did Freedom Jazz Dance. Like,
Oh, you're talking about Miroslav Vitov.
Miroslav Vitov, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's Czechoslovakian.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but he that's one of my favorite tunes, and that arrangement that he did, Freedom Jazz, that he kills it on
Fucking fire,
upright.
dude. It's so good.
Yeah.
Have you heard it?
I am not.
You got-
We should play it
Yeah.
now.
You're dropping names that I
No, you
got
got to hear that.
Dude.
He's
Okay.
killing it. you are familiar with the song "Freedom Jazz Dance."
I mean, not off the top of my head, but if I heard it, perhaps.
Man, Miroslav is killing it.
Yeah.
But you do know who Miroslav is?
No, I don't.
He's
Not
the
off the
original
top.
bass player from Weather Report.
Weather Report, right?
Oh, okay. Well then, yes, I do know who he is.
Yeah, he great bass player.
Amazing.
I remember when I was young, I had some of his solo albums, a lot of the acoustic stuff.
Yeah.
But he also put some albums out playing the electric,
Yeah.
and it was cool. It was different in a good way. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. But hearing that,
know.
hearing that on an upright is.
Yeah, no, that's
It's like the first time I heard Mingus.
right.
You know.
Yeah.
No, it's a lot of great cats out there, but I think a lot of these cats, we're existing in this moment of the YouTube,
Where everybody's emulating everybody.
Yeah, I think cats should
Right.
take the time. You can love and respect and be influenced and inspired by the cats you choose to be, but don't get away from yourself. And I think that's what a lot of these cats are doing. They're getting away from themselves because it's very, very, very easy to emulate.
Right.
And mimic and copy. It's like human brains are just set up like that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
But to sit down and do your own thing, it's like I remember reading it was many years ago when I kind of first started playing, and it was all about, for me, it just spoke volumes to me where it was saying, you're gonna be the bass player, be the bass player. Don't be the drummer,
Right.
and don't rely on the drummer. And I understood exactly what that passage was saying. It's like you're gonna be tight with the drummer, but don't be concerned about the issues that the drummer may be having. Because what's tripped out is you can be a great bass player, but if you got a horrible drummer, they're not gonna blame that horrible drummer.
Right.
They're gonna blame the bass player. He's like, it wasn't me.
Right.
It was. You can't say that. You just be like, oh. So you learn to develop your existence without a drummer. You develop that internal pocket, that internal groove, that internal rhythm. You got to do it like a singer sings from the diaphragm.
Right.
You got to do it the same way with bass. You got to have the strength in your body, because bass is a physical instrument. You like physically and spiritually physical. So it's a lot going on because you have to listen to a lot.
Right.
You can't be stepping on the vocalist's feet.
Right.
You're juggling a lot. You can't be like I don't care about, I'm working with someone, they don't have to give me a bass solo, to be honest. They don't have to introduce me to the audience.
Right.
And I've said that to band leaders, and they be like, what? I said, no, I don't care about that.
I can't.
Right.
I don't do bass solos.
Right, I'm just, it's like, but I'm sure we all can agree that we do know bass players that come into a band setting
Yeah.
or situation saying, I need 2 solos
Yeah.
tonight.
Or they're
This
just
and
gonna
that.
kind of solo a little bit over what's going
Yeah.
on.
And that doesn't get you nowhere. You'll get fired, or you just won't get the call
Right,
back or
right.
anything. So yeah. So now bass is a cool instrument, but today, cats they gotta do things in a different way.
Well, part of me is a little jealous, I think, because when I was coming up, before, you didn't, same as you, didn't have YouTube,
No.
didn't have these things, and now there's such a vast library and connection to, and not only, YouTube with, there's so many videos out there you could watch till the end of the time and still not get them all. In addition to being able to connect with those bass players. Like, you may have thought Chuck Rainey was this guy
Oh yeah.
30, 40, 50 years ago, but you didn't really have access to him unless he was coming to town touring. Maybe you could get backstage and get his attention.
Right.
Now,
You really got to work to get that letter to him.
right.
You know?
Now
Yeah,
I can
you're right.
tweet at Mono Neon or in IG message him
Right.
and get kind of a first-hand connection in a way and build relationships, not only with bass players, but like other musicians. Like when I was in a band at 15, my reach were the people I knew in high school. Like, oh, you
Right.
play drums, you're my drummer now, as opposed to now, like, who is within a 10-mile radius of me that plays drums? And I could do, with a little bit of Googling and Instagramming
Right.
and seeing who's friends with who, I could go, oh, well, my buddy Bob over here plays drums, but he knows a guy who's a badass.
Right.
And I'm going to connect with him,
But with that, don't you think that there needs to be this responsibility to make good music? Like, we have all of this access to, like, really good information, and people don't don't we have a responsibility to not make shitty music?
Well, but nobody sets out to make shitty music, right?
But you can say someone's making shitty music. Sometimes it really is shitty.
Right.
But a lot of times it's based off of the listener's opinion if it's shitty or not.
Sure.
But again, I don't think anything can necessarily take away from the experience someone has. Like me being the age I am, you guys being the age you are, my experience as a musician is different from your experiences because, I mean, I can talk about things that you guys never got the experience because just how things is, how life evolves and moves along. And there is a lot of bad music out there today.
Sure. And
there is the category of just an opinion whether we like something or not.
I'm going to backpedal big time on this one. Shitty is not the right word and bad is not the right word. I think what I construe, like my brain construes with shitty is generic. I don't like generic music. And I don't often, actually, I very rarely will say that something is shitty.
Right.
Because it's someone, at the end of the day, it's still someone else's form of expression.
Right.
You know what I mean? Not to be kind of a wimp about that subject, but that's just the reality. It's somebody else. Like, if it's a dad who works an office job and comes home and cracks open a couple Leinenkugels with his buddies down the street in their garage. Like, God bless them. If they're going to play the Freebird solo for 15 fucking minutes, that's great. Express yourself, Larry. But it's not for me. It's not something that I will actively participate in.
Well, certainly, like, the barrier to entry nowadays is a lot easier, a lot smaller. Like, even 20 years ago, if you wanted to make an album, you had to go to a studio, spend time, and that meant that, like, a lot of the people who were kind of mediocre just dropped off because they didn't have the dedication to sit in a studio or the money they wanted to put into it or the time and dedication to make great music.
And if they couldn't play, like, that means more time, which means more money. It's
right.
Just like,
and
you gotta sober up.
This was tape time. This isn't Pro Tools click. Take 30 takes to make one song. This is, you had to do it and get through it. So now, with a computer and a $300 interface and a cheap microphone, you can, Billie Eilish recorded her album in her bedroom. And frankly, I think it's a really good album.
No, I think it's cool. I've heard some tracks from it. It comes down to people's creativity,
right?
And I think it's cool. Yeah, at the end of the day, because of course, we remember when to go in a studio, it used to cost an arm and a leg and a few other body parts. Now it comes down to time, to ears, and the creativity of the people behind the project.
Well, and the technology's made it a lot easier to do that sort of thing. You see these studios that are closing up left and right because people are able to record multi-platinum records in their fucking bedroom.
Exactly.
And I'm still recording music to this day, and I'm doing most of my pre-production right here where we're sitting. You see there's gear behind us. I've got a Pro Tools setup, preamps, and I still have, tens of thousands of dollars into gear, but I own it. It's my thing. I'll have it forever.
Right.
And it's also taking me 20 years to acquire everything and do that. But I still do everything here, as opposed to, like, when I was a kid, my father owned a music store in the south of suburbs, and we were on the first floor, and in the basement was a recording studio and an old school tape.
Right.
And so you'd walk in, and the console is 12 feet long, and it was like this massive, floating floors, the whole thing, this massive thing. But that's what you had to do in order to, record your stuff. And nowadays, it's just not that hard anymore. And it's and I think that's a gift and a curse, right? I appreciate it because I'm able to create what I think is very commercial. I mean, I did music for Harpo Studios for Oprah Winfrey, jingle music for years, and we did it on this crappy PC computer with an old Layla card, and just like I was going guitar direct into the board, into the sound card, and Oprah paid my bills for a couple years, and it was, again, but to say it was, generic in and out of commercial music.
Right,
Didn't
right,
have to be
right.
high fidelity or anything.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
But at the end of the day, it paid my bills, and it was something we did gritty and dirty, and it worked, and I'm thankful for that. But I think, like, to go back to what Mark said, like, it also means we're flooded with so much now.
Oh, yeah.
SoundCloud, music,
it's
and
a lot.
Stuff like that, and
There's
it makes
this-
it murky for even the exceptionally talented musicians. I think we could all name 10 exceptionally talented musicians or albums that have been put out in the last couple of years that aren't getting the recognition that they deserve, that we may collectively think are exceptional records or exceptional players, but the water is so murky with so much stuff. It's so hard to get that stuff to float to the top.
Oh, I have musical schizophrenia. I think it's great. There's something new to listen to every single day.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
something new to
absolutely.
be inspired by.
That's interesting.
But I think that studios are very important. I think there's a sense of urgency that everyone at this table understands. When you're in a studio, there's not just a sense of urgency, but also a sense of, it just demands creativity.
Right.
You have to allow yourself to be creative in those environments.
Oh yeah,
Because sometimes you have a finite amount of time. Sometimes it's open-ended. Sometimes you have an engineer who is very hands-off. Sometimes you have an engineer who's very hands-on. And it's just about adapting and learning how to groove with each other.
Right.
And I think that it's really important to preserve that, not for the sake of preserving it, but for the sake of being able to create those quality records together. And I'm talking mostly in a band format. When you have a band that you put together, and you put these songs, this music together, like Queen. Like, I mean, if anyone's seen Bohemian Rhapsody, you see that moment captured.
Yeah.
The first time they go into a studio and they have like a day, and then they go out and to that barn and they're recording the records and stuff. It's just so awesome to like watch that telling of that situation, but like being in that sort of environment as well. It's just, there's nothing like it. I love being in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a band and it took us basically 3 years to finish our album in the studio. We were like writing in the studio, and I look back at that time with fond memories.
Right.
I also look back at it like, man, at the end of it, I was like, this took way too long. But I think, there were few instances where, songs in the key of life, where Stevie spent so much time in the studio writing and arranging and producing and making that album. But most cases, you had to have you had a 10-hour block.
Right.
And you had to do your 3 or 5 songs in that 10 hours, and you better have your shit down, rehearsed, and ready to go, because everybody pitched in $200 to get this 10-hour block, and if whatever we get done at 10 hours is it, So, yeah, I think it's, like I said, I think a gift and a curse nowadays, but I think you're right that, like, I've also worked with engineers and producers in the studio who have, where I'm like maybe struggling with a part or a moment or a thing in a song, and I'm not sure how to get there, and I try to articulate, and then the engineer goes, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to run put a microphone through a bullhorn into, and get this really creative thing sounding, or they end up having, they end up putting their flavor on your stuff too, because they have, a means to an end that you didn't know about, and they've spent 10,000 hours in the studio with tons of musicians, and they already have a toolbox of things that like can get you to the finish line that you were unsure about. So like finding a great producer is a big thing. Also like writing in the studio with, again, 4 other egos in the room.
Right.
Like, I got this great idea, Mark, and then you're like, nah, bro.
Yeah.
Right,
It's a
the
bad
let down moment.
What do you think about this? No, that's not gonna work. So that can be a problem too. But yeah, recording in the studio.
You've got a body of work out there. Tell us a little bit about that. Trioplicity,
Well,
etc.
The first solo CD I did, album, I guess today we call it a CD, but it's an album. That album is called the Low C Sharp Theory. And how that came about, I had a concept for a 4-string bass guitar that would go lower than the B string. So, it goes back to this whole journey, even before I got to that album, because the whole concept of the instrument that particular instrument started in the 80s.
Okay.
And you know, I don't want to like sound. I was working on the concept of the instrument. Is a C sharp string, an F sharp string, a B string, and an E string. The E string on this particular bass is where the G string is on a standard 4-string bass.
Right.
And I had this idea.
But the pitch is the low.
The
E.
C sharp. Well, yes. That E is the standard E.
Yeah.
But
so the highest string is actually the lowest note on a standard 4-string bass.
Yes.
Got it.
So it's E, B, F sharp, C sharp. Now this was in the 80s. I had never heard of anything like that. I was familiar with Anthony Jackson and Jimmy Johnson and their thing that they were doing with the 5-string bass, but I wanted to go lower. And so in the course of all that, I ended up going to prison. And it was a journey to go through there and then get to where I had did my first solo CD, which was called the Low C Sharp Theory, was based off of my concept of the low C Sharp string and the F sharp string. And so while I was in prison, I had my bass with me, and I would be working on this tuning.
So like you're literally in your jail cell.
Yes.
And they let you have a bass with you.
Well, okay, you know, this is
sounds
live.
like a weapon in jail. If you
No. This is live, and we're going to be real about it all. Before I went to prison, for what I went to prison for, I was in the Cook County Jail.
Okay. Which has a history, and still to this day.
You don't want to go there naked.
Oh yeah,
you don't want to go
the
there at
county
all.
Jail, as a matter of fact, it was a known fact that if you would rather, if you had a choice to do your time in the county or in prison, cats would rather do their time in the prison.
Yeah.
This ain't no folklore, no BS, no.
And what time is this? Like what era? Year?
86.
86.
This was
okay.
1986. It was Gladiator School. It was like it was a what you see or think prison is or a serious jail is. And what happened? So while I'm in the county jail, I didn't have a bond.
Okay.
Meaning, I didn't have that option where I can bond out. I did have the money to bond out if I had a bond, but the judge was like, no bond.
Right.
So I had to deal with it. I'm like, oh man. So I had to sit in the county jail and fight my case from the county jail. So one day, I went to the warden of the county jail, and I was like, I'm a musician. Can I have my instrument sent in? And I told him I was a bass player. He said, yeah. So I had the bass sent in, but I couldn't keep, while I was in the county jail, I couldn't keep the bass in my cell.
Okay.
So I had to keep it down in the rec room with the weights and, stuff like that. I had to keep it in like this utility closet.
Okay.
With mops and mop buckets and things like that. So every day, instead of me doing like a lot of guys, they would go down to rec and play basketball or lift iron. I would play my bass.
Right.
And it was not plugged up, though. There was no amp or anything.
Okay.
So I would listen, I would play it acoustically.
While they're dropping weights. And
Yeah, but I was off in an area where I could kind of hear it, but I still want to see the thing about the connection between, as a musician, you don't realize what that instrument means to you when you're taking away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I started
no
really.
choice.
I was like, wow, man.
Real quick, what kind of bass was it?
A Steinberg XL.
No shit.
Oh yeah. Yep. It was one of the early.
Cook County approved Ned Steinberger basses.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a Steinberger. Yeah.
The official bass of Cook County Jail.
That's right. And prisons all across America. Seriously, I had I had my Steinberger. At the time, I had two Steinbergers, a fretted and a fretless one.
That's cool.
And but I had the fretted one. You know.
I love those basses.
Oh man,
I love the way. They
we're
sound.
talking like the tiny body one.
Yeah, the graphite one, the original one. Yeah, the graphite.
It's even
one.
more like a weapon.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that would be an uncomfortable bass to have in prison, though.
Well, see, the
Right.
thing about the whole culture of prison, when cats see you with something like that, it's a beautiful thing.
they respect it.
Oh man, they respect it.
It's like cherish. It's like that's
they
that's
have
what's keeping him
questions.
sane.
They
Yeah.
want to know, like, wow, I've always wanted to play one of those. It's that type of thing. It's really a light.
Yeah.
And so the cats were cool. Wherever I go, I'm cool with people. So it wasn't like no issues or anything like that. But I was concerned. I didn't want anyone getting to it or breaking it or whatever,
Right.
damaging it. But so when I would be done with rec, I would give it to this officer, and he would put it back in the utility closet, and I would watch him lock it in there.
Right.
So this went on. I think I was in the county for like a year, and so back to the whole thing with the C sharp string and the F sharp string.
Right.
I was still working on that whole thing, the idea and the concept, and I ended up getting whisked off to prison. I got my time. And
So you spend a year in prison.
about a year, no,
and you're
a year in the county.
in the
jail.
county, and
Yeah.
you're fighting your case or
Right.
whatever over there. And I'm sure that just takes a long time.
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's the way our court systems
Right,
work.
exactly.
And then, do you get sentenced, or you're still like fighting your case at this point?
No, I end up okay. I got my time.
Uh-huh.
I got well, I was supposed to get 35 years.
All right.
You know,
And would that mean you'd still be locked up right now?
no, I would have done
Because
half
well,
of that.
86, and I was born in 83. I'm 36, so you'd be just about the point. I think you'd be about to get
no,
out.
no, no. I would have done half.
Right.
A
You're
little- yeah,
as long
half
as you were
of
a
that
good
35. But
person.
but I ended up getting 12, and how I got to 12. Ornette Coleman helped me get to 12 years.
Shut up.
Who's this?
Ornette Coleman, jazz saxophonist.
Okay.
He helped me get to 12 years, and to make a long story short,
No. Let's do the whole story, man. Like how. First off, when, like,
I heard a
when
story.
and how in that 12 years did you meet Ornette Coleman, or did you just like? How did that come about? First of all.
okay. Remember, I said my father had all these albums, these jazz albums.
Yeah.
Right.
But what's interesting, he had no Ornette Coleman.
Okay.
I found Ornette Coleman's music on my own as I'm, traveling into this zone of bass, being a musician. And I first heard Ornette's music. I was like, wow. So it got to the point where all my friends knew that I wanted to play with Ornette. And he's one of less than a handful of individuals where I was like really heartfelt. I want to play with him.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about Robbie Williams.
Right. Right. Okay. You have
the British singer.
right.
He's a pop singer. Hand to
So-
God.
I know who he is.
And Michael McDonald.
I went to Chicago Jazz Fest, September 1983, and Ornette and his electric band Prime Time was scheduled to perform. Now, what's interesting about that performance, I don't drink. I've never none of that. Not my thing. I don't do drugs, but listening to Ornette Coleman Prime Time live, that was the first and only time I ever been high off of music.
And never since.
I've never heard any music that I'm talking about high from the music.
Right.
That was the first and last time.
When you say high, do you mean like a euphoric feeling?
Yes, I equate it to like somebody, they may feel they smoke weed or they
Right.
tipsy off a little liquor. That was the first and only time. And so my friends who were at the Jazz Fest, when the show was over with, cats were backstage and they would say, man, you should go say something to Ornette. And I was like, man, I was like, man, he don't got time to hear some little punk talking
Right.
about whatever. So the next day I called this house artist by the name of Adonis. Adonis is like a legend in the house music world. And I remember calling Adonis, telling him, I was like, man, I saw Ornette last night at the Jazz Fest, blah, blah, blah. And he said that a mutual friend of ours went to the show that night and saw Ornette as well. And he got to meet Ornette, and he got Ornette's phone number. And I said, what? I said, you know what? Let me call you back. So I get off the phone with Adonis, and I called, I can't think of his name right now, but I called him up. And I said, I was just talking to Adonis, and he said, you met Ornette last night? He said, oh, yeah, I was at the Jazz Fest, and I was backstage and this and that. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, you got his number? And he was like, yeah. I was like,
The gatekeeper.
yeah. I was like, can I have it? And I never will forget what he said. He said, why? And I said, I have something to offer him. And he gave me Ornette's phone number. And I called Ornette up a few weeks later. literally cold called him
Yeah.
at a payphone.
Right before cell phones.
At a
before all that.
payphone that I was using to do illegal things with. But
Between transactions.
I called Ornette on that phone. It was like my phone. It was like my office. Seriously. I called Ornette Coleman up and I introduced myself. And he was really cool. So we would talk around his tours.
Yeah.
He would tell me, call me on this day or this week. I'll be back from Japan. I'll be back from,
Right.
and I would do it. And I'm going to tell you something. This is what I share with people. You never know why a person is telling you to do certain things.
Right.
Because every time Ornette told me to call him on this day or this week or whatever, this month, I did it. And that was showing Ornette that I was punctual.
Yeah.
I was a man of my word. And I was respecting him in his time enough to, follow through.
But that goes both ways.
Yeah.
He did that to some like random person he's never met before.
He didn't even know me. The man.
But you all had a connection.
Yes.
Some kind of connection there.
Or he was building that connection. Right?
Yeah.
Well, what happened was over a period of time, we would be talking about, I would be sharing with Ornette my ideas, my concepts
Right.
of music. And Ornette would say, he would tell me that he thought they were valid.
Right.
And this is someone who I want to actually work with. And so
Did you tell him that you wanted to work with him at that point?
I think I did. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Because I was talking to someone that I really wanted to work with.
Yeah.
And so one day he called. He called me this particular time, not at the payphone, at home, on what we call the landline today.
Right.
Yeah.
The curly.
Yeah. Go all the way from the living room to the back, out into the backyard.
Right.
But he called me and we were talking because that's what we would do. We would talk during his tours or things like that, and so we would call each other. And so he called me one day and he said, if I send you a ticket, would you come up here and play for me? Because I used to go to New York, back and forth to New York, here and there. And I shared that with him. But he said, if I send you a ticket, would you come up here and play for me? And I dropped the phone. Because I was like, see, Ornette was to me what Charlie Parker was to Miles Davis.
Right.
That's the best way I can put it.
That's a great way to put it.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
And I got my composure back together. I picked the phone up, and he said, I'm going to have my son Donardo call you Friday with your itinerary. I thought, okay. So I was telling all my friends, these thugs, and some of them was
an itinerary.
Some of them was legit musicians, but some of my thug friends, they didn't know who Ornette was. I'm going to go to New York, Ornette Coleman.
Right.
Yeah, whatever, dude. Are we still going to rob that bank? You know?
Jesus Christ.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, like, I'm trying to change my life, guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Support me. Give me some love.
Yeah.
So Donardo called me, had my itinerary, things like that, and I was at the airport, and I called the guitar player named Marvin. He's a jazz guitar player. Well, he plays all kind of music, but he's worked with Cassandra Wilson. She's a jazz vocalist. If you guys are not familiar with her, but Marvin has worked with her forever, and he's worked with a lot of people, a lot of the legends. And I remember talking to Marvin at the airport, and I said, you know what? Guess where I'm at? Because I was always somewhere doing something. He said, oh, where you at? I said, I'm at O'Hare. I'm on my way to New York to Ornette Coleman's house. He said, oh, man, that's cool. And so I'm all frantic. I'm going to be honest. I was frantic, because this was like a dream.
You're finally going to meet the guy.
Yeah, because I never met him in person. We just talked on the phone for like a year or more or something,
Right.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Let me get off this phone before I miss my flight. I get off the phone. I see the airplane. Miss my flight. So I go up to the counter. I said, was that flight? She said, yeah. I said, when is the next one going out, from O'Hare to LaGuardia? And she told me. So I ended up sitting in the airport for like an hour, waiting for the next flight. So when I get there, my luggage was on the flight that I missed. So
Of course.
and I had my basses with me. I had a J bass in the Steinberg with me. And when I get to the LaGuardia airport, there was my bag. just sitting there with like $100,000 worth of jewelry in it, just sitting there all by itself. And this was in the 80s.
So you packed $100,000 worth of jewelry?
Well, what it was, it was a few pieces, but that's what they were worth.
Right.
It was a few pieces, a watch, and a couple of rings, and it was a few pieces, and so I called Donardo Ornette's son, and I let him know that when I was still at O'Hare that I was gonna be late. I missed my flight.
Right.
So he said, when I get to LaGuardia, I called him up. He said, take a plane. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Take a cab to my father's place. So I said, okay. I have never in my life been so nervous. I was so nervous.
You got your bases. You've got $100K worth of jewelry in 1983 going to
No,
New York.
this was in 85.
85.
Yeah, this is in 1985.
All right, 85
right.
going to New York
right.
in a cab to meet your hero who you've only been talking to on the phone for
I
a year.
never talked to him.
And you're
in
about
person.
to play with him.
Yes.
I'm pissing my pants.
And I was so nervous that my throat felt like it was swelling up. And the closer the plane, the closer the cab was getting, when I was on the plane was when it started.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm on my way. This is happening.
Yeah. I was like, wow. Because I want to play with Ornette. I really this was the dude I want to like work with. And before I left, he had called me and said there was 7 people from Lagos, Nigeria staying with him. He said, do you still want to come? I said, you know what, Ornette, I don't care if the whole village is there.
Right.
Yes. So he said, okay. And so it was an individual by the name of Twin77. He was a famous Nigerian artist. He was a piano player, keyboard player, and he was an artist.
Mm-hmm.
He was known for his artwork as well.
Okay.
And so when I finally get there, Ornette was living in a school. Well, it used to be a high school, New York City high school.
Huh.
And I'm looking at this big giant. So I'm like, wow, this is tripped out. So he comes downstairs. And it's the first time we met face to face. Beautiful. He was a beautiful person.
Right.
He just was the coolest dude. And he said, I know you're probably a little nervous, so we're not, just come on in and just relax.
Right.
I'm like, wow.
Give me some sugar.
Like,
Take the edge out.
And so he took me to my bedroom. He showed me where, and it was what used to be a New York City high school.
Right.
Classroom.
So you got a whole classroom to
Yeah.
yourself?
Me and my bed. And I was like, so at night I was in the bed like, wow, this is tripped out.
Right.
And so Ornette said, I know you're probably tired, so tomorrow we're gonna get together, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. So I spent a lot of time with Ornette, and
How long were you there?
it was a while. It was a while because I'll get to that. Because I came back home, and then I was gonna go back to New York, because I had a band in Chicago, and we were practicing, and Ornette wanted me to kind of open up on a date here and there with him, in Chicago or whatever. And so what happened? Ornette, he has a concept called harmonics. It's his own language, and he wrote a lot of the scales out. I actually studied harmonics with the man who created the concept.
That's cool.
Literally, yeah. It's
That's
like
so cool.
Yeah, and so many people wanted that. I mean, I meet people all the time who like they want it. It's like it's something you have to hold sacred.
Right.
You just can't give it to everybody because they're gonna misuse it, or abuse it. They'll get more out of it than Ornette would have ever gotten out of it. He's the one who created it.
Right.
So you just can't give the harmonics to everybody and anybody. You have to choose accordingly, And so one day we were all, me, Ornette, and some of the individuals from Twin77's group. We all went out to dinner, and we went to a flea market.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I see all these albums, and I said, let me go see and there was these Ornette Coleman albums, and I'm like, I'm with Ornette Coleman, and that whole experience was cool. So Ornette ended up buying, it was this little pendant.
Right.
It was a saxophone with a green stone in it, and he really liked it. So he kept looking at it. He had it on his shirt. And then he looked at it. The stone had fell out.
Oh no.
We spent like 20 minutes looking for the stone. But back to Ornette in the whole thing with me and my prison time. When I come back to Chicago in '86, I think it was May of '86.
Yeah.
I got in trouble with some cats who wanted to rob me. And I get away, but the way my mind was back then, it was like, they had threatened to kill me. So I was like, I can't be walking around looking over my shoulder.
Right.
I can't have my security with me everywhere I go. So I saw one of the cats and we got into it and boom, and I'm locked up, no bond. And so my lawyer ended up, he's one of the biggest advocates of fighting to keep you off of death row.
Okay.
And he wasn't at the time, but he was moving in that direction. He's strong about humanity.
I mean, were you facing death row potentially?
No.
It was attempted, right?
Right, it was attempted murder.
Yeah.
Right, I couldn't even kill the damn dude. I felt bad, but I was like, damn, I couldn't kill him. So our parents always want to do their best to help us when we get in trouble.
Right.
And so my mother ended up telling my lawyer that I was a musician, because I wasn't telling them nothing about that. My mind was like, how are we gonna? What is our angle? How are we gonna deal with this case?
Right.
And so I think it was on a Sunday morning. The officers, I was still in the county jail, and the officer said, "Hey, you got a visitor," but Sunday wasn't our visiting day. So I'm like, what? I know I had a little pool, a little juice they want to call it. So I'm like, I don't know what. Okay, who is it? So I go downstairs. It's my lawyer. And I'm like, what is he here for on a Sunday? And so he tells me, he said, "Hey, your mother tells me that you're a musician and you work with this and you done this." Yeah, that was my attitude. Like, man, I want to go home.
Right.
So my lawyer says, "You know Ornette Coleman?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you think," this was my lawyer's idea. He said, "Do you think?" Well, my lawyer turned into a groupie. Literally,
that's not a bad thing
because
in that situation.
I know, right? Because he was studying jazz and classical guitar at the time. So he was really big into Ornette's music, things like that. So he said, "Hey, do you think you can get Ornette to write me a letter and the judge a letter, or like a character reference?"
Right.
I said, "Yeah, I think so." So he said, "Okay, cool." So I go back upstairs to my unit I was staying on, and I called Ornette, collect, of course.
You have a call from prison, Cook County Jail, all that.
But I was calling, not a lot, but I was calling Ornette because we were still talking.
Right.
Because when I first was locked up, Ornette was calling the house looking for me.
Right.
Because my mother, she said, Ornette Coleman's been. I was like, oh man.
Tell him I'm.
So I was a little
jail.
embarrassed, I was like,
Right.
oh man. So I said, you know what? I'll call him. So the first call, I called letting him I was in the county jail, and he was mad. He was like, what happened? I told him, and he was mad about that, and so he just told me stay in touch with him, things like that. And so I would call him every once in a while. But this time, I was calling him to ask him, could he write the letter?
Right.
So all this was coming around with they were going to give me 35 years. And
Right.
So it was coming around to my court date was coming up. My court date to get the time was coming up. And
had you at this point, like, I believe I had read somewhere that you were kind of accepting that, like, all right, I'm going to do this 35 years and kind of preparing yourself for that,
yeah,
right?
because it's like, see, I could have got 50 or 60 years.
Right. So you
So
thought
the way the
35,
system- yes.
maybe 17 to 20, I'm out.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. So the way the system is set up, I had done things and got away with,
Right.
but there were witnesses on this one.
Right.
And so it was kind of like, oh man, got my back up against the wall.
Right.
Good lawyer though. always important to have a good lawyer. Seriously,
Right.
not some
Saul
Public
Goodman.
defender.
right. You know,
Right.
but so yeah, I was like, you know what, I do this time. So I was like, oh man. So I get to court, and the judge, you know, they're like way up there on this,
Right.
you know, on a cloud or something, and he says, I have a letter here from a Mr. Ornette Coleman, and I'm saying, I'm looking around like, he got Ornette. Ornette wrote the letter, you know,
Right.
and my lawyer.
And you
had the
hadn't
lawyer.
known that he wrote the letter.
Well, I
at this point.
told Ornette to write the letter for me.
Right.
I asked Ornette to write, and he said, "Yeah, I write it."
Right.
And I just kind of didn't think nothing else of it. I was hoping for the best.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
You didn't know if it was going to happen or not. for
well,
sure.
knowing Ornette the way I knew him, yes, I was just more concerned about his schedule.
Right.
Right.
And what that letter would mean to you. You know,
Exactly.
like, oh,
And,
he writes the letter, maybe that's a good thing for me, but at the end of the day, is that going to reduce my sentence from 35 years to 12? You know?
That's exactly how I was thinking about it all, and I was like, yeah, it was a lot on my mind. You know, it was heavy. And so I get to court like a month later after I had talked to Ornette about the letter, and the judge said, I have this letter from a Mr. Ornette Coleman. It shocked me.
Yeah.
I was like, what? He said, I happen to be a fan of Mr. Coleman's music, preferably his classical pieces.
Wow.
I was like, oh, wow. So he said, you know what you're here for today, right? I said, yeah. You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, like, yeah. And it ended up, he changed his mind.
Huh.
And he said, he says, how does 12 years sound? I said, sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And so they had to,
Reduced by a third.
Right.
yeah, they had to do with the stenographer. You know, they had to change something, you know.
Right.
And I got to 12 years. And now somebody's like, 12 years. You know what? 12 years is a lot better than 35, 50, or 60 years. That's the
Right.
reality. It's a
Right.
whole lot better. And so, and I don't want to bore you guys with this stuff, but
We're fully interested.
No.
but
This is so
but
fascinating.
the whole picture is much bigger than the subject itself, because I have to be honest, I still had the whole zone of gangsterism
Sure.
in me, the culture of gangsterism
Right.
in me. I still had that in me, but I still was straddling that fence with wanting to be a real musician,
Right.
because I was hunted. I would be like, before I was incarcerated, I would be like, knowing I was supposed to be somewhere practicing,
Right.
that would haunt me because I would be doing something else,
Right.
you know. And so when I got the time, they shipped me off, you know,
Right.
down to Joliet, what's called processing.
You
And I didn't
Jake
have
Blues and
yeah, I did. Yeah, that's exactly where I was in Joliet.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was. And I didn't have my instrument with me during the. I think I was in Joliet for a month or 2 months.
okay.
I had to send all of my stuff home.
Okay.
From
And-
Cook County.
Yes, from Cook County. So I
Yeah.
didn't have the base in Joliet with me. So when they finally sent me to the prison that I was gonna, because I had been in, I think, 3 or 4 different prisons, but when they sent me to the first one that I'm gonna do my time in, I went to the warden, because I was going through like I guess I can relate it to withdrawals.
Sure.
I was literally missing my instrument.
Yeah, I totally get that. There's been times where I've set down my instrument, and then all of a sudden, 3-4 months later, I'm like, man, what am I doing with
It
my
can be
life?
depressing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember going to the warden, and I remember saying to him, this is in prison now.
Right.
You know, I was like, look, I don't play no b-ball. I don't lift iron. I'm a musician. Can I have my instrument sent in? And he was like, what do you play? I said, I play bass. And he's, oh, that's my favorite instrument. And in my mind, like, yeah, but can I get my bass sent
Yeah.
in?
Right.
You know, and he said, yeah, because he had to approve it.
Right.
So I get back to my unit where I was, you know, where they had me, you know, I was staying in the unit, and I called one of my brothers, and I said, hey, can you send one of my basses? And he said, which one? I had a lot of nerve. So I said, send me my fretted Steinberger. And that's the one he sent me. And this is what I meant when I said I had a lot of nerve. I'm in prison. I got a fretted Steinberger bass, but I was missing my fretless Steinberger bass. So I don't know if that's some diva BS. I don't know. But I end up sending the fretted Steinberger back home
From prison.
And had my brother send my fretless Steinberger.
You didn't go to the warden and go like, thanks for letting me get this bass, but I really need both of my basses.
But what was tripped out is they had a band room there.
Right.
And they had some bands there. I was in one of the blues bands. It was like a blues type band. It was a country band I was playing with. And I had a AM FM radio about this big.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And there was a guy who worked in a machine shop, and he converted that. He drilled a hole on the side, and I would take the dial and dial it all the way to the last part of the AM channel, and I plugged my bass in, and I had a little amp.
Huh.
That's awesome.
So
That's
yeah,
great.
so the
That's
amp.
crafty.
Yeah, so the amp was in my cell with me at night. See, I was able to keep my bass while I was in prison. I was able to keep it in my cell.
Okay.
And so, but I couldn't keep the gig bag.
Okay.
Because
Why is that?
Well, the Steinberger gig bag looks like a
like a rifle.
or a shotgun
Yeah,
gig bag. Right. So I couldn't keep the gig bag. And so I would be in my cell playing my bass. I would have the volume down kind of low.
Right.
So it goes back to me, the Steinberger, if you guys aren't familiar with the Steinberger, it's graphite with a synthetic fingerboard.
Right.
So it's a very strong instrument. So I was experimenting with this low C sharp, this low tuning.
Okay.
So I had the E, B, L sharp, C sharp.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting back to that, So I was working with that whole idea and that concept. And so when I came home from prison,
How long did you actually
6 years.
Did 6?
Yeah,
Mhm.
6 years. I had to, like I said, it's been an interesting journey personally, because when I came home, what I learned and realized was that every 6 months, or maybe even 3 months, there are these drastic changes in society that we are not aware of, because we're in the midst of that change, but we're not aware of it.
Right.
But I was taken from all of that.
Right.
And so when I came home, everything was just magnified. It was a hell of a reiteration into a society that I once was a part of. I had to learn how to be outside at night, walking around freely.
Right.
It was a lot of mental adjustments. Like I would be in a restaurant, I didn't know how to place an order.
Right.
Like I'm talking to someone like at a McDonald's or something, and they're just looking at me. I don't know. I'm like, oh, can I have, so it was all this relearning. So I had to deal with that. There was a lot of stuff I had to, deal with, and still trying to be a musician.
Well, so while you're in doing your 6 years, you said you were, you were struggling between having this, kind of thug gangster part of your life and struggling between wanting to be a musician. Did you, you get out of prison, are you like, all right, I'm going to do this music thing? Or are you still like slipping back into?
Well, what happened with me while I was in prison, a lot of my friends, some of us was growing.
Right.
We wanted a different life.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends, he has a high school to this day. It's an alternative high school. And we were incarcerated together. And I remember, because see, in prison, you're going to have some life talks.
Right.
Some real talks.
Lots of them probably.
Yes, with your homies, with your friends, your buddies. Because if you have a light at the end of that tunnel, meaning you have an out date,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking for that out date. You're hoping for that out date to come. Right. See, there was a thing about incarceration where you didn't want to die in prison. Whether you get killed in prison or die from being sick. The thing was, if you're going to die, can I die on the other side of the gate?
Right.
On the freedom side, the free side.
Right.
Because you feel
like it's on your own terms.
Right. You feel like a failure spiritually if you die in prison. Right. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to die, let me get on the other side of this gate.
Right.
And that was the whole thing. So he would talk about what he wanted to do to uplift his community, his people. And he got out about a year, maybe 2 years before I did. And we stayed in touch. And he was doing it. Yeah. And he's still doing it.
That's amazing.
It's a very successful
What's the name of the school?
School Without Walls.
School Without Walls?
Right. He may have changed it, but that's what it has been for many years. His name is Earl Williams and his wife Lisa Williams, and I have the highest level of respect for him and his wife Lisa, but him as well because he come from a background where someone would say he'll never amount up to nothing.
Right.
And here, the school has been around for over 25 years.
That's amazing.
Right.
And he is doing it. He's dedicated.
Where's it located?
It's on the south side.
It's in Chicago.
It's in Chicago,
Yeah.
but it's different locations. I don't know where it's at right now because he was expanding, so he would have so many kids, students,
Right.
that it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So he would have to go to different, move to different locations. Then there was some locations they didn't really want him and the kids there.
Right.
That's
all of
BS,
BS.
yeah.
Right. So to be in a situation like prison and you're talking with guys, because people think that the only thing that's happening in prison is negativity.
Right.
It's negativity out here.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, whatever type of person you are out here,
Mhm.
that's the type of person you're going to be in there.
Right. Well, I mean, I've never been to prison or jail, any of that. So I only have what is in my mind of
Right.
that. And it's a very scary image in my mind. So I imagine once you're there, like, it's probably harder, or like, you're dealing with gangs and you're dealing with, I'm imagining most of the people are in there because they are violent criminals. So then you're like surrounded by other people who are just that have the greater potential to hurt you.
Oh, yeah.
And
most
stuff like that.
definitely,
So
yes.
you're like definitely in a heightened sense. And I can imagine, like, if you've got your base, you're in prison, I would imagine that would be a thing that would keep you on the straight and narrow. Because if I'm the warden or someone who's in charge of disciplining an inmate who
Right.
is acting out, and I know you're playing bass, what do you think the first thing I'm going to do when you act out is? I'm going to take away
You're
your
gonna take
bass,
away the instrument,
right?
yeah.
So, like, if I were in prison and I had the opportunity to have my instrument, I think I would definitely be like, all right, I don't want to lose. Especially, you like you said, I was going through withdrawals. I missed my instrument.
I was missing it. I was like,
And you want to, and it's an opportunity. Like, you can see that as an opportunity for growth and go like, well, I'm in here 24 hours a day.
yeah.
And I can spend that time, playing cards with these guys, or maybe causing a ruckus, or I can sit here and play my instrument.
No,
get
you're
better
right
at what
on
my
point
thing.
because I don't play cards, and it's tripped out because a lot of that is taking place in prison.
Right.
Guys are playing cards pretty much the entire day.
Right.
They do not leave the card table.
Right.
You
that
know,
chess or whatever.
yeah, it's like that just was not my thing. And guys even said once I had got the bass, they said I was more chill
yeah.
because I couldn't relax. I was like, I want my instrument, and then I also felt like I had let myself down, and a lot of people who believed in me,
Yeah.
So I was carrying, all kind of weight on my shoulders.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm not looking for sympathy, but I'm being honest here.
Right,
It's like
right.
a lot of things was going on in my brain. And then when I came home, like I was saying, it was this culture shock, this
Right.
society thing. It was like everything had changed. I remember I was my younger brother. I couldn't even step out of a car properly. I would get out the car while it's still moving. And my brother was like, "Man, can you wait till the car stop?" I was like, "Yeah, right." Yeah, car still
You're right. That's how that goes.
right, exactly, literally. Because I would be opening the door and the car's still rolling.
Right.
And so my brother was like, "Can you just wait till the car stops?" Yeah, you're right. That's how you.
We have to stop first, and then we get out.
And then I would find comfortable. I would be very comfortable in grocery stores at night.
Because there's
Very-
no one there?
No
Or?
one's there.
Right.
You're comfortable or uncomfortable?
Comfortable
Right.
because it was very, very quiet. See, in prison, it's noise all day,
Right.
all night,
Right.
all day, all night. It's a riot. It's a stabbing. It's a lockdown. You might be on. You might be locked on lockdown a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
It's always something going on. A guard can kill somebody on the yard.
Right.
It's always something
Somebody's
going on.
beefing with somebody, whatever it is.
Right. You can walk in a chow hall and the tension is that thick.
Right.
And so that takes a toll on you mentally
I
and
bet.
spiritually because you're tired.
Did the system, like, when you're in prison, you're doing 6 years, a decent amount of time. Are you like forced into, like, I gotta hang with the black guys or I gotta hang with certain people.
I can only speak for Illinois because I've never done time in California or New York. In Illinois, it depends on what region you are. Like in Illinois, if you're like down in Menard, which is way south, a lot of white supremacy.
Yeah.
See, the thing, it's not so much that that's the way it's set up, but it is set up that way because of the historical fact, how the historic aspect of prison and the culture of prison.
Right.
A lot of white inmates become victims because of what happens out here in this society.
Sure.
So you have a bunch of you have black inmates. A lot of them feel this is a chance to get back at the man.
Right.
But you have these white supremacist individuals who say to some of these young white inmates, don't be messing with those guys.
Right.
The black guys, the Latino guys,
Right.
hang with us and we'll look out for you. But
Right.
a lot of times, they do more harm to the individual than the ones that they're telling them to stay away from.
Right. Well, when I've, in movies and TV shows where I'm a white guy. It's my first day in prison. And the first thing that happens after I get, my picture taken, get my clothes or whatever, is the white dudes come and meet me and set me up and give you your toothbrush or whatever the case may be.
Yes, that's a lot how it works, but you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Right, but you're in a new situation.
But
you're
have
scared.
to be careful.
Right.
Because whatever you accept from
Are you
someone,
planning on going to jail?
No, man, but I'm
he's
afraid.
asking, but see, it's like this. Whatever you're accepting, it's some strings attached.
Right.
Always.
Right.
So it's like it's best to just starve until you get your, until
I hope I never go to prison, but I'll take
see,
that
this is the thing.
advice.
Someone can say, I hope I never go to prison.
Right.
But you can leave out your house tomorrow morning and end up in prison.
You never know what's going to happen.
Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You just don't know. I mean, you could be the most law-abiding citizen in the world. And I mean, I saw it. I was in prison. I saw guys who never done nothing.
Right.
They were in there for something they didn't even do.
Right.
They were in there because they met some girl at a club somewhere, and they wake up and she's laying next to them dead.
Right.
And they don't know what happened.
Right.
Only
But you were the last person with her.
But only to find out later someone else was involved
Right.
and did something, So it's like, yeah.
I think that's definitely one of my greatest fears is going to prison for something
You would not do well.
I don't know what
You know what? Let me tell you something. Since we're talking about prison, let me tell you something. Cats can get mad at what I'm about to say. I'm talking about guys that's been to prison, these tough dudes. Anybody can be raped in prison.
Sure.
What I mean by anybody, I mean anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how big, how tough you are, how many bodies you got under your belt.
Right.
If you sit in your cell, 20, 30 guys come in.
Right. What are you going to do?
And 18 of them guys holding you down.
Right.
So it's not about, prison is what it is, but it's how will you deal with this situation after the fact?
Right.
Because I hear cats all the time, ain't nobody gonna do nothing to me. This and that. I'm deadly with these hands.
First thing I do when I get in there, I'm gonna punch the biggest guy in the
right.
face.
All that's some Hollywood BS.
Right.
Because if someone wants you, you're gonna be got.
Right.
Whether they want to rape you or kill you.
Right.
Because cats that say, "Well, I'm gonna go to PC, protective custody."
Mm-hmm.
That's worse than being in general population usually.
Right. Isolation.
Right.
All
So
day.
cats can talk all that stuff they want to talk about. I'm just speaking for what I saw, what I've seen. And speaking of this whole white supremacy and all this type of stuff, there was a young guy, a young white kid. He was cool. We were all on the same unit.
Mm-hmm.
He was cool until this dude came in all about the Hitler ideology. And everybody was kind of tense because this dude was all about that BS,
Right.
And he got to the young guy, and he was putting that in the young guy's head, whatever. So one day, I went to the young guy's cell, and I was telling him, I said, "Man, you was real cool before, blah, blah, blah came on the deck. You need to chill. And he ended up. This was a young guy. Can't beat a fly.
Right.
He ended up getting caught with a tattoo gun in the cell. That's a violation.
Right.
So he was. They took him from the unit we were in and put him in SEG. And he sent word that he wanted to talk to me. And so the SAR said, you know, he wants to see you. So I said, yeah, okay. So they take me up there. He crying. He's bawling his brains out because they were sending him. Oh, I asked him. I said, look, you did this to yourself. You didn't have to get involved in all that type of stuff. So I said, where are they sending you? They're sending me to Pontiac.
Michigan?
No, Pontiac Prison in Illinois. That's
okay.
It was, back then they called it the Thunderdome. And
that doesn't sound good at all.
no, especially for a young white kid.
Right.
You know, it was like throwing a lamb into
the lions.
Yeah,
right?
and he was. Yeah, and I told him, I said, and he didn't have that much time left to do. And I was like, I kept telling you, did it to yourself. It's nothing. You know. And I don't know what happened to him, or they shipped him out like later that week. But the point is, you can easily get yourself caught up.
Right.
Because, you know, most of the individuals in prison, a lot of times they on some more sneaky BS anyway. You know, they're not trying to be your friend. You know,
look
they're not
out for you.
No, they got
It's about using you.
They got a serious ulterior motive. You know.
Yeah.
And again, I hope we're not, you know, getting off topic.
No, this is important.
But all of this is related to individuality, the things that we go through. Because, you know, you take a blues artist and they say, well, I was going through these changes, and they wrote about it.
Right.
So we all go through something. But, you know, well, back to the whole the whole concept of the SubContra bass, which is what I called it. But then there's another instrument. It's the extended range bass, which is like a 7 or more string electric bass, and people refer to that as a SubContra bass. I call my 4-string concept SubContra because it was going lower than the open B.
Yeah.
The contrabass. Yes, it was going lower than that. And so while in prison, I'm working on these tunings. I had standard gauge strings, but using the Steinberger to test these tunings, it gave me an idea of what type of strings I can use, or I think I can use, what type of chords, you know, winding, things like that. And so again, when I was coming home, I had to kind of acclimate myself back into this society. So that was kind of on hold for a little bit. So I said, I got to get this bass made because it was killing me. And I finally got it made. And the first person I called was Billy Dickens.
Oh, Bill Dickens.
Yep, I called
Buddha.
Bill. And I said, because I had been telling Bill about the bass. Oh, and one thing I want to say, while I was incarcerated, well, before I went to prison, the whole concept of this C sharp, F sharp string, I was in my world working on that. But when I came home, Billy had a bass with an F sharp string on it. And I remember when I called Billy, I said, hey, remember the bass I was telling you about? Like, yeah. I said, I got it. I said, you want to hear it? So I told him what the tuning was. And when I said C sharp, he said, whoa, that's low. And so I said, listen to this. Because a lot of people laughed at me, thought I was tripping, I was a crackpot. You know, that's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. And me being who I am, whatever. And so I was playing out of a 210 combo amp or something.
Yeah. And
Billy could hear it over the phone.
Dang.
It blew his mind. He's like, I can't believe. I said, yeah, I told you.
Who made the first one?
Scott Serene.
Serene
I
basses.
I brought it to Scott, and Scott, I brought the concept, you know, the instrument, because it was more than just this tuning. It was the pickups too, because I wanted to capture that the open C sharp and the open F sharp. I wanted precise clarity.
And what strings were you using?
At the time, hold on.
SIT?
No, I'll get to that in a second. Bill Bartolini did the preamp in the pickup for me. We was back and forth with that. And my choice of body wood was mahogany because of how it resonates in the low end. But it has a punchiness in the mids.
Yeah.
And the neck is maple neck, purple heart with a Gaboon ebony fingerboard. The reason I went with the Gaboon ebony fingerboard, I thought it balances out the low frequency with the whole concept because it's not muddy at all.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
not,
that would be the first thing I would think
Right.
is that when you're on that low,
Well,
you got to be afraid of.
well, that was the whole thing. A lot of people. That's what everybody was like. Jauqo, you tripping that? But so Scott built the bass, and I had to have strings
Right.
Right.
because this is for real. This is a fact. A low C sharp string didn't exist
Right.
nowhere.
Yeah.
So-
What gauge is that?
That was a 195. So what I did, I called up.
The thumb.
I called up David
It's like my
Lionheart.
penis.
A power cable.
Oh, those were the jokes that I was getting. But I called up David Lionheart, Jeff Lantroop, and David Brummett, and Mike Connolly. They all worked at Dean Markley Strings.
Okay.
And I said, hey, man, I got this thing going around in my head, blah, blah, blah. And I told them the C sharp string. They was like, C sharp. They was like, okay, Jauqo, for you. So I would go to the Dean Markley factory
Right.
up in Michigan. And we would spend a weekend, working on the string. And so we would get to what, we would work, it was all about it, And so I put the bass, put the string on the bass. That was it. But what happened was because the string was such an oddity, they could not dedicate the time to stopping the machines just to make
One.
that
right.
one type of string.
Right.
And I respected that, and I understood that, and I'm always respected because they didn't have to do what they did for me.
Right.
And so then that's how I end up, because they couldn't do the strings no more, those particular strings. I was at a NAMM show, and I happened to be picking up all these different basses, like every 2 or every 3 bass I would pick up. It had some strings on it that sounded nice to me or felt nice, and I would ask the luthier, "What string is it?" And they were like, "SIT." I'm like, "What?" And they were there at the NAMM show, and I went to them. They kind of knew who I was, and the rest is history. I think I've been with SIT 20 years now.
Dang.
Yeah.
I've been with them a long time.
Yeah, my buddy my buddy Ron from the band Bong Ripper knows who you are because of those strings.
Oh, okay.
Because he plays. I think he's in like low F
Yeah.
or something like that. And he for a long time was using like a .190.
Oh yeah, that's the
that.
whole thing. A lot of people know me for what the strings, the amp. But I want to get back on the bass because people were saying that the bass you can't hear it and things like
Right.
that. So I did that album called The Low C Sharp Theory in a somewhat controlled, chaotic atmosphere.
Okay.
If you listen to the album, it's 2 guitar players. They're in and out. There's 2 guitar players and a drummer, and I'm proud of that album.
Right.
It's like the bass is grooving, and a lot of people were kind of shocked, that there was no bass solo. There's no bass solos nowhere on the album,
Right.
and I was like, no, that's about the pocket. I'll get to one of those albums some other time.
Right.
And the album is just snaking. I mean, the bass is just snaking all throughout the album. And what I did when it was time to mix it, I purposely mixed it where you could put earbuds in and still hear the bass. And so when the album came out, a lot of cats, they were like, wow. And they used those 2 albums, the Low C Sharp Theory and the Trioplicity album. A lot of people have been using those albums as references when you're talking about low frequency
Yeah.
and groove. And when I did the Trioplicity album, it was basically the same thing. Went in with a drummer and just a guitar player, but a slightly different approach. But you still hear the bass. But I didn't use the Serene on neither of those recordings. I used there was a luthier named Mike Adler, and he made me a fretless SubContra bass, and that's what I used on those 2 albums.
That's so wicked.
Yeah.
They sound awesome, man.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. As a matter of fact, the guy just bought the digital download of the Trioplicity a few days ago,
Yeah.
and I found out he had bought the Low C Sharp Theory at one time too, and he was telling me what he thought of them, which is cool. I respect that because you put it out there, somebody's gonna like it or they're not.
Right.
I had a review for Bass Player magazine. They dogged the album.
Right.
It was the editor, Bill Lay. He literally dogged the album. And I listen to the album. I honestly think it's a great album. Not because I did it, just the role of with the bass and to show like these areas where the bass is dropped so low and you still hear it with these crazy guitars on top and things like that. So I'm cool with it.
Well, it sounds like you definitely did something that was out of the ordinary, and like you said, you tend to like what you're familiar with.
Right.
You did something unfamiliar. And some people aren't going to like
that.
When
I did the recording for the Low C Sharp Theory, Bill Dickens said I did something that was dangerous in the area of I separated the two guitar players. They could not hear each other.
That sounds a little dangerous to me.
Yeah.
No, they literally this is what each guitar player was hearing. They were only hearing me and the drummer. They did not hear no other guitar player. And so Kes was like, man, why you do that? But if you listen to the album, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like we were all in the same room together.
Right.
And so, but like when I went in, like that album is 110% improvised. And then if you listen to the album, since we're talking about the album, it's a great example of knowing your role, because the drummer on that album, we never played together.
Just in the studio, that was it?
Went in the studio. I told him, because he thought it was going to be all this. He said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I said, nah. He said, what? I said, no. I said, just count it off. He said, what do you mean count it off? I said, just count it off. And so the drummer can count off with the sticks. I just automatically lock in. And there was no overdubs or anything on those albums.
Yeah.
It's just, just go in. I know my role. I'm a bass player. Right. I'm not trying
That's a challenge to get everybody to communicate that way, and the fact that the two guitar players couldn't hear each other.
Literally, they were in separate rooms. One guitar player, they couldn't see each other, and they could not see hear each other.
Well, did Bill have that information before he wrote that scathing review?
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. But
like you would think that like knowing that going into it, or at least shortly after listening to it, would prompt you to listen to it again.
I feel,
and experience the magic of it.
No, I agree with you, but I feel because I wasn't some super name,
right?
There was no issue. There was no interest.
Right.
I'm being totally honest. I believe that's what part of it was, because there was another magazine, Bass World or something, same thing.
Right.
I believe if I was just stumping and plucking and slapping and popping and all that kind of stuff, but this was an actual album, you had to sit down and like just listen to it.
I've noticed the trend like as well among a lot of these publications and stuff, and it's no knock against any of the musicians who are featured in
right
there,
exactly,
but it just seems like the same circle of musicians, of bass players who are often featured. They've certainly earned it, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for growth, and I often wonder if that has had a negative impact on those publications.
I from personal experience, I believe it has, because there's a lot of musicians out here, bass players, since we're bass players, there are a lot of bass players out here that are they're kicking ass. But they don't have that name that some of the icons have, and the icons earned it. But there are some icons, I'm not going to name names,
right?
But it's some BS, because there are some icons, or cats who are considered icons, sounding exactly how they sounded in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Same notes, same bass solos.
Right.
They have not shown no growth.
Right.
They have not shown no growth.
Right.
Yeah.
And all they're doing is skating on what was.
Right.
You go see them live, you be like, he was doing.
They're resting on their laurels,
right?
Yeah.
But the magazines and the cats, because the whole psychology of, like, when you look at cats who are in a position to help or a position of power, they love their heroes,
Right.
And a lot of times they're blinded by their heroes, and sometimes their heroes be on some BS.
Right.
But you got a guy who's really doing something passionate, contributing at the time where we may be with the growth of the instrument, and that person does not have that iconic name or that iconic brand. So these cats in a position of power or influence, they kick that cat to the side. Who is this dude? Let me tell you something. About the whole SubContra bass, this whole thing I did with the C-sharp string, it's a fact that the string didn't even exist. I'm not ego tripping. We're talking about what's a fact.
Right.
You cannot go anywhere in the history of our instrument and say, "Oh, there was a C sharp string in 1940. There was a C sharp string in 1980."
That's awesome. You should be.
No.
You should legitimately be proud of that.
I am proud of it because my journey going from before I went to prison, thinking about doing that string, getting sidetracked, and actually doing it,
Right.
and still doing whatever I'm trying to do. It's like with the 15 string.
Yeah,
you know,
Pratt, right?
No, yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
Right.
Oscar Pratt.
We're working on something.
But what's his name? Warrior.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They made the world's first 15 string.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I'm just gonna make this short. That just came about when I first met Warrior, J.D. Lewis,
JD. Yeah.
and Jesse O'Neill. He's not with Warrior now, but he has his own company now called Ergo Instruments. They wanted me to work with them, like as an artist, and I had the same thing, this thing in my head, and I said, well, if you guys build this 15 string bass for me, we could talk. They're like, what? 50? I said, yeah, it's a 555, tune E to C, standard, and
Yeah.
2 octaves for each.
It's like Tom Peterson's
Right.
triple fours.
Right. And so they were like, okay. And it was fretless, and I played it for years, and it was the whole thing where, you talk to people, if you have these aspirations and these dreams, it's not going to be easy.
Right.
But people they just give up at the first onslaught of something that's not going the way they think it should be going.
Right.
And so the whole thing with the 15 string bass, it was in my head for years. And we have to learn to recognize opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that with Warrior as a positive opportunity to get this instrument out there.
Out in the world, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's some YouTube clips where I'm playing it like live in concert, and it's like, it's cool
Right.
to see something, Like Ornette asked me one time. As a matter of fact, it was our first sit down when we talk about concepts and ideas and music, and he says to me, "What do you have first, the idea or the concept?" I'm saying, I'm like, why you gotta come with this?
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, because Ornette, he was a deep individual, and I said, I got the idea. And he said, I'm glad that's what you said. He said, that's the right answer. He said, because you can't have the concept without the idea.
Right.
He was always coming with stuff like that. And one day he said, hey, you want to meet Jauqo Pastorius? Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Because Pastorius would be at this basketball court down the street from where Ornette lived.
Yeah.
So he said, Jauqo was down there like every day, So he said, we'll go down there this afternoon. I said, okay. And I didn't get to meet Pastorius because Ornette fell asleep that day. And when it was time to go, I'm like, where Ornette at? So I'm looking for him.
Right.
And I'm going through this old big giant school. So I get to his bedroom. I kind of looked in, and he was laying across the bed asleep. And I was like, I'm not gonna wake him up,
Right.
I didn't bother him. But yeah, but I got a lot of love and respect for Ornette. I'm always have a lot of love and respect for Ornette. But the whole thing, it goes back to the whole point of, we got aspirations or anything. It's like we have to believe in ourselves. And I don't care who you are. At the end of the day, we should not be concerned about those who we think should support us.
Well, you should be in competition with yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
like
your biggest competition.
Like I got some friends that are so close to me that they know the pain that I deal with every day. And what I mean by pain, it's like as an artist, you're trying to do things, get things out there.
Right.
Like Mark. I've been knowing both of you guys a long time, and I was talking to Mark about the 15 string bass, and I was kind of like apprehensive because it's like I've dealt with so much, non-believers, so to speak.
Sure.
But you'd be like, well, this is valid.
Right.
This actually works, blah, blah, blah. And Mark is like, we're talking about the 15 string. Mark was like, he understood, he got it.
Right.
I remember one time Tom Peterson, he come up to me. I don't know Tom Peterson. I know who he is. And he was doing this. He was like, and I was standing out like, oh boy, when I do the Tom. And he said,
He's such a sweetheart.
yeah, he's real cool. He's very cool. He says to me, you in that 15 string. He was like, you in that 15 string bass. It was just me and him there at this moment.
That's cool.
And I said, yeah, you know, he had just recently read an article I did, an interview or something, and I was talking about the 15 string. And I said to him, but you gave us the 12 string. And that was our moment.
Right.
We laughed, you know, it was because it was the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
It was literally the truth. And, you know, we gave each other that brotherly hug, and it was cool. But I didn't even know Tom Peterson even knew who I was or knew anything about me in that 15 string bass.
Yeah.
Cause like I said, he was coming up to me like, I'm like, oh man, what I've done. But that's the whole thing. You never know what your contribution is. And then for someone to try to or attempt to dismantle your contribution, or your contribution isn't a contribution really.
Right.
They like, it's almost like they invalidate it.
Oh yeah.
Or they have to
deal with that
validate
so
it.
much. You know, like,
You know who's doing a really good job of not doing that? He's doing a job of kind of rebuilding a reputation. Is the guy Joel McIver at Bass Player Magazine?
the new bass player. Man?
Yeah, yeah.
Them
He's-
guys wouldn't. They wouldn't even give me the time of day.
I-
I'm talking about the old. You know, the old.
Oh, I mean,
Bass
like,
Player
well,
Magazine.
John Daria is doing a great job with Bass Magazine. I think he's definitely taking chances.
No, that's
for
good,
sure.
and that's what cats need, because we're out here and we
Yeah.
hear how everyone says.
The younger guard is getting it.
Right, that's good, that's
and
good.
like watching like where the older guard has kind of like left some gaps. They're filling
Right.
those gaps a bit more. But Joel McIver definitely took a chance with. It wasn't a matter of taking a chance, but he was a lot more receptive to having an artist who was alternative. He wasn't like the Rudy Sarzo, the fucking Billy Sheehan's of the
Right.
world and stuff. Again, like very worthy bass players,
most
but you can only write
definitely,
about them
yeah.
so many times.
Right,
So he wrote
right.
about Al Cisneros from
Okay,
Sleep in
right.
that new Rickenbacker that he put
Yeah.
out. And like that was awesome. And so it's like it's there. It's just like it's just a
Exactly.
matter of like getting them at the right time and the right moment and the right person to make those things happen. I think they get it. I think they understand
that's
that
what
you
we
can only
need that, because it's guys who are doing some nice stuff out here, but they easily get overlooked because, you know, the politics of like companies, you know, you got
Yeah.
these magazines, you got to put my guy in.
Yeah.
It's the same old guy every week, every month, every day. You're
Right.
like, really, you know?
It's their month.
Right.
November is bass player.
Right.
Days month. And,
So
Yeah.
it's like we eat what we eat, we live how we live, you know? So
right.
yeah, my whole journey has been like, whatever I've done, whatever I choose to do, I've always done it in a sober state of mind.
Right.
So all of my everything, my pain, my happiness, whatever, because as an artist, you go through so much.
Right.
You go through so much, but you have to learn that you have to maintain your mental stability.
Right.
You know, and a lot of cats. See, I never seek fame, and I notice a lot of artists or musicians, they really want to be the guy, they want to be the cat,
Right.
but it's like you will kill your mental state
Chasing that.
chasing it. You just have
Right.
to just let it happen.
or like once you get it, keeping it.
Yeah,
Right.
so-
That's
yeah.
why you see a lot of those people who have the mighty fall
Right.
because they just become obsessed with keeping it.
My
Right.
thing has always been get in where you fit,
Yeah.
and we're all where we're supposed to be, and that's the truth. Because I remember when I was in prison, I had no traumatic experience in prison, none. I had one fight the entire time I was incarcerated. I had one fight, and that was with 3 dudes at one time. It wasn't a one-on-one.
Right.
And I'm man enough to say, one of the guys hit me in the nose,
Mhm.
and the next day I'm looking like a raccoon. You know, it's like what the, you know.
Right.
So you know, in that whole incident, almost kicked off a riot. You know, so
Right.
you know, it's like you are who you are. You're gonna be what you're gonna be at the end of the day. So
Right.
we're all bass players. That's what we are. you
Yeah.
know?
I think there's there's still the self-exploration and trying to better yourself and trying to be something greater than what you are today, right? But I think like trying to find your unique voice is really the place to be. But it is a mental game. I remember like writing that album I referenced earlier that we spent about 3 years on,
Right.
where some days I'd wake up and go like, why am I spending so much time on this and energy? People are going to hate it. What am I doing here? And then the next day I'd wake up and I'd be like, this is going to change the world. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like and you're making music from nothing, from no sound, from nothing.
Right.
You know, you're creating, and at this album we had like a 13-piece orchestra on it, and like it was this big, huge production, and like I'm taking silence and creating a groove, a song, a whole thing, a verse, a chorus, a bridge. Is it laid out right? Is it mixed right? Am I getting the right tones here? People are going to hate it. And I would doubt myself daily and then reaffirm myself daily. And eventually that album came out. The band quickly broke up afterwards.
Wow.
And that was the end of that. But I still listen to that album to this day. And every time I put it on, I'm like so proud of it. And I think it was ahead of its time. I think it was
It's your baby.
It 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I
is my
remember
baby.
Doug Wimbish. When I did the low C shot theory, we were talking about it, and Doug, he said he dug it, but he asked me. He said, "Jauqo, do you like it?"
Right.
I'm like, "Yeah." 'Cause I was saying, "Yeah, I'm proud of it," and he's like, "That's all that matters."
That's all that matters,
Right.
man.
And that's the truth. That's
Yeah.
all that matters.
And like,
you know?
I'm in this doom metal band. That
Oh, yeah.
Really, it's just my friends. It's just it's 100% about making records with your friends, with my friends, that we just feel like listening to. Like,
Right.
and at the end of the day, if somebody wants to support that
Great.
in any fashion,
You know what?
Great,
That's
cool.
really the state of it all today. If
Yeah.
like I tell a cat, you know what? If you're making $60,000 a year today off of music,
Oh, you're doing great.
You're doing great.
You're doing great.
you're doing great. Yeah,
Right.
You're doing great. And cats need to be in tune with reality
Right.
because, yeah, cats need to cut the BS out. They need to stop the fronting and
just
understand.
just focus on the art,
Exactly.
and the rest will naturally come.
You know, the whole thing, like focusing on the art, it's like my own experience. Part of what I've been through is what makes me the musician I am,
Right.
or the artist, whatever someone wants to, how they want to define themselves. So it's like, it's all these other ingredients that goes into play with that. It's like, we talk about like cats. Can we talk about endorsements?
Oh yeah,
Because-
please let's do that.
Because
Right.
cats, there's so many misconceptions about endorsements and how they work.
Right. And you and I, in particular, I think have had some conversations on Facebook about this because this has been brought up because there's a pretty strong bass player community in Chicago,
yeah.
specifically
Oh, yeah.
with a couple of Facebook groups that I know you're a big part of, and guys like Will,
Right.
and those other guys are moderating and set those up, and there's a lot of open discussion. I think it's a super healthy discussion,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's never there's very little hate, but it's always like
A couple times it gets to that area, but
it devolves sometimes.
there's some OG cats in there. They're just like, nope, we're gonna lock this up.
Right. Well, and I think
And
I think
one of them's in our presence.
Right.
It's pretty awesome.
well,
to
I think
watch.
you will. Those guys shut things down pretty quickly when they get out of hand, or
Yeah,
somebody says something stupid,
Well,
or whatever.
the whole thing with endorsements is a lot of cats think it's about getting something free.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the biggest misconception, because at the end of the day, it's not about a free piece of gear, because it comes down to the relationship.
Right.
I personally cannot play a bass that I'm not feeling.
Right.
Seriously, that I just, if a cat see me with a bass, they know by now that I actually dig it.
Right.
If you see me playing a bass, I dig it,
Right.
because it is really hard to play a bass you are not feeling.
Right.
And I hear so much stuff about endorsements, and cats don't understand it's about relationships. I've been with the same amp company, I think, oh wow. The company's Ashdown.
Right.
Of course, no amp is for everybody,
Right.
but for me, I really dig it. And they got so many models to choose from, but whatever, it works for me. I've been with Ashdown. I think I got with Ashdown a year after they started.
Okay.
And that's how long I've been an Ashdown
So
artist.
early 2000s.
No, 90s.
90s.
Yeah, it was 90s.
After Trace Elliott was sold.
When Trace Elliott was sold, Mark had I think a 5-year non-compete disclosure.
Yeah.
And after that was up, he came out with Ashdown.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing Ashdown in the magazine, and I thought, oh, that looks pretty cool. Cause I haven't owned some Trace Elliott stuff in the 80s.
Right.
And when Mark Goodday at Ashdown, when he came out with Ashdown, I stumbled across it at the NAMM show.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my history with Trace Elliott, I was using Trace Elliott in the 80s. I was like, oh, let me check this out. And I thought it sounded good. It's a sound that I tell Mark that I like. It's a thick sound that works for me. And I like it. And so about a year after Ashdown came out, I got with them, and I've pretty much been with them ever since.
Yeah.
And the cats are cool. I mean, they're very low maintenance. Mark is a geek. I hope I'm not offending him, but he's a geek when it comes to all that.
He's a car buff too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's hardcore into the cars. So
Yeah.
he's a cool cat. And then it comes down to like what is your relationship based off of with these companies? Because you see cats.
Oh man.
They'll have an endorsement. Well, they say they have an endorsement, but 2 weeks later they're talking about they're using this bass, but you never see them using the bass and things like that.
Man, when I was working at CME, the number of people who would come in who would ask for manufacturer information so they would chase this endorsement.
Yeah.
Or like they would try all these things. Like I'm thinking about it, reaching out to them to do an endorsement deal or something like that. After all that work, it just like shows like, man, first off, you're really out of touch because you're in a music store and like you're using this stuff as a vessel to, I don't know. I don't know if it's all for show, if like they're putting on like this this performance in a way.
At the end of the day, for me, like endorsements, like if you can, like aside from like I'm gonna get first, I feel like most endorsements you don't get free gear. Let's be clear. Like maybe you'll get a free bass, but most of the time you might get something at cost. Right. So you're not getting a $3,000 bass for nothing. You might be getting a $3,000 bass for $2,200 or $2,000 or something. Like markup on instruments isn't that huge.
No.
Right.
Exactly.
So you're getting dealer cost, and if you're Victor Wooten or Marcus Miller or something, like certainly those guys probably aren't paying for those instruments, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like if you want an endorsement, like I was listening to Anthony Wellington once, and he goes like, I was talking to a buddy, and he wanted to get this endorsement for a pedal or something like that, and I go, how much is the pedal? $200? Just go buy the damn pedal. Like it's $200.
Right.
Like what do you? At the end of the day, you're worried about these little things. Just play the things that you like. Play the things that you enjoy. And I don't know. I personally, I go through a lot of gear sometimes, like my current bass I've had for maybe 2 or 3 years. And prior to that, I had a Ken Smith that I played pretty regularly. But like pedals and amp heads and cabinets, like those kind of get constantly rotated, and I'm trying different things. And now I'm a huge fan of Bergantino stuff. I played Aguilar stuff before that and Eden stuff before that. So like, I don't want to also be like locked in necessarily to one thing,
right?
Unless I know, like Ashdown speaks to you. That's your thing.
That's what it comes down to. Like I say, Ashdown they make a lot of different models.
Right. I know they do the portable lightweight stuff, the tube stuff, and
his
lots
tube
of
amps are phenomenal.
Right.
The CTM series.
Yeah.
The CTM 15, I recorded like a couple songs with that just for like a distorted sound. It is
it
such a mighty amp.
Yes,
such a
really
great
good
sound. And the CTM 300, love that. It's like probably the best 300 watt tube amp out there. I know I'm committing sacrilege right now, like saying the best. It is a serious contender for the classic Blue Line SVT. And the thing about that is it's a much more versatile sound than the Blue Line SVT. The Blue Line SVT does that one sound really well, and it's reliable. You know what you're getting into with that. I feel like the Ashdown stuff, you have a bit of sculpting that you could do with the tube amp.
With the tube amps, I have an Ashdown CTM 300, DTA 400, and the 427. they all got their own sound.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
They do not sound alike
No.
at all. And the BTA 400, it's like some type of nuclear thing or something.
Mhm.
It's a hybrid. It's not a 100%
Too.
tube.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting hybrid.
Yeah.
But it's still a tube amp.
Right.
But the CTM 300, it's kind of got that Fender Bassman.
Yeah, it's in that. It's in that.
Ampeg kinda-
It's on that block. I think
Right.
like there's like the Fender world over here on this block, and then there's the Ampeg, and this is the guy who lives on the corner. You know.
No, you're right. You know,
Right.
And, you know, it goes back to like we saying about basses. If you see me playing, I actually dig it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but I gotta have like super low action. And,
What it's important for younger people to remember is that a lot of the people out there who get endorsements for whatever reason, they find the instrument, they buy the instrument with their hard-earned money.
Right.
They use it as this vessel to create, and it becomes an extension of them a lot of times. And then when those people develop relationships with these manufacturers, then it makes sense. You get your Victor Wootens out there, and like
Right.
hearing the story about how Victor ended up with his first Federa
Right.
instrument,
Right.
and like it's I'm not sure I'm not sure if I'm going to tell the story properly, but essentially he was this hot shot player, this young guy. Producers wanted him, heard about Joey Lorcella
Right.
and Vinny Federa, and Joey brings him the bass, and then he finds out that like the bass wasn't paid for, and ends up mailing the check himself with an apology letter. He's like, I love this bass so much. And like it just became a part of his identity. And that's the thing, like these kids, like I'm gonna say kids,
Right.
I'm 33, but these younger players, they just don't understand. And there's a lot of older players too who are just out of touch, and they just think that I want to play your instrument. It's good promotion for you. It's like it's much more than that, and you need to have a personal connection with the instruments. I think this is a lesson too on the manufacturer side.
Oh yeah.
Is to not just give endorsements to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes around and
Right.
says, I play with this person, I'm the musical director for this person, I do these tours and this and that, and I'm gonna have my instrument, your instruments on stage in front of like hundreds of thousands of people by the end of the year. It's like, it's not about that. Like, it
Well,
needs to be an extension of you.
I think it's partly about that, right?
It's
is.
not,
It
it's
is.
not
At the end of the
totally
day,
about that. I
right.
think the misconception is that it's 100%
Right.
about how many people are going to see it. It's
Well,
not-
it comes down to, okay, I don't want to say any artist name because that'll get it'll kind of tell who the bass player is.
Uh-huh.
But you have a bass player that's touring with this giant pop artist.
Right.
How many people in that audience
Give a shit. My wife's home.
is
You hear the
interested in
dolphins.
what the bass player is playing?
Right.
yeah.
No.
It's like, you got an artist who's got like 10,000, 15, 20,000 people in the audience. It's like how many people is like, oh man, forget the singer. What is the bass player using?
Right.
Because 9 times out of 10, they can barely see the bass player.
Yeah,
Right.
You have to have a presence in the bass community. You have to be.
you literally
an
have to have a
You
presence.
have to influence
That's
the
a-
people who
that's
are
a
actually
fact.
going to buy the shit.
Right.
That's
You
a
can't just
fact.
You can't just be like like.
Nobody goes to
barely lit-
Bruno Mars to see
Yeah,
the bass player.
Exactly. Like maybe one person.
Right.
And
You know.
Just a very
let's
small.
Let's not knock him. He's
a
a
great
bad
bass
dude.
player,
He's
right?
a bad dude.
Right.
He
But
killed.
like,
Bad dude.
people are the
Dancing with all that shit,
14-year-old kid that's going to see that wants to see Bruno Mars.
Yeah.
And
Barely see the bass player.
that's not a knock on who's playing for Bruno Mars.
No.
I'm sure he's a great bass player.
Oh yeah, he kills. Yeah.
Right. But also like getting back to like a couple things. One, like I would play. I think it would be. I would play the gear regardless of an endorsement. Like if this is what I like, this is what I want to play.
Exactly.
Like I'm gonna play it whether Mesa Boogie wants to give me the endorsement or not.
it can get
Al
tr-
Cisneros is a prime example of
but
that.
it can get tricky though, because sometimes you can fall in the category of being exploited.
Sure.
You have to be real careful about the potential to be exploited by a company,
Yeah.
because a company can reap great benefits of
Right.
your just holding the instrument. They know you actually dig it and you're playing it,
Right.
but it's like they don't want to give you the time of day. I know some bass players who have helped some companies in a great way, and the company will not give them the time of day. And
yeah.
I think that's not cool.
Right. Well,
It's like, wow,
recently listened to an interview with John Mayer, and when he left Fender,
right.
because he said, like, oh, I had all these, tons of ideas for guitars, and I call up Fender and I go, hey, can you send me a guitar with an all rosewood neck? And he goes, they told me, well, you're allotted 2 guitars a year and you've already met your quota, so no. And he was like,
Yeah.
listen, if this will be good for both of us,
Right.
like if I make this work, trust me,
Yeah.
we're all going to be happy about this.
It just shows how out of touch. These are people who are actually in touch with their gear. They care about their sound. It's not just some
Right.
player who's like, I'm gonna play a lot of notes and I'm really good and I don't really give a shit. You can tell, like, you can see those players, like, they don't give a shit about what they're playing. They're gonna play whatever's handed to them,
Right.
and they're gonna do it well. But then there's the players like John Mayer who actually give a shit about their
Right.
tone. Like, they give a shit about their amps, their pedals,
and
the
has
licks
a
that they're playing.
huge fan base who gives a shit about what he cares
Yeah,
about.
or
Yeah.
like the Jeff Matzes of the world. He's the bass
Right.
player for High on Fire. That
Yeah.
guy, like, he is obsessed with his tone, and people are obsessed with his tone. And like whatever he is into, there is maybe a small community, but there's a very like intense community that follows that kind of player.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Well, you said it best when you say one of the best ways to actually endorse a bass is to actually be playing it, and you're making music that's actually featuring it.
Right.
You mentioned John Mayer. Doing this thing with Clover.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, you played one of them at.
It's a great bass.
recent- Thank you. Seriously, you played it at the
It's
NAMM
that
show.
the three pickup
Right,
one.
with the 3 single coils. The owner of Clover, his words were that the bass far exceeded his expectations.
Okay.
So that made me feel good because, first of all, he said he wanted to do something with me. We did it. They have not. Clover has been great to work with. They have been so open-minded, so cool about everything. And it's not about you have to do it this way. No, it's like it's what's going to work for me and what I know is going to work for other players too.
Right.
Not a chunky neck. Some cats don't like chunky necks.
Right.
I want the quality of the instrument. Again, Mark saw, he played it.
Yeah.
He was like digging it. I think he was digging it. No, I was just messing with him. But it goes back to what we're talking about endorsements and actually playing an instrument you like.
Right.
And with that instrument, I wanted something to be super, super, super versatile.
Right.
Because there's a thing where you got the humbucker pickup, where you got the 2 single coil in one
Right.
a Music Man casing. That's a different sound from having 2 individualized single coil pickups.
Because
Right.
the actual position of the pickup in relation to the tension of the string, it gives you a different sound. That's why
Exactly.
you have the magic of the P bass. It's because those coils are in this sweet spot.
Well,
Right.
offset.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I also think like endorsements too, like at the end of the day, you need to provide a value to the company you're endorsing, right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
like,
most definitely.
if I'm I'm Fender, I'm Mesa Boogie, I'm whoever, I'm going to give you a $2,000, $3,000 instrument, or perhaps a whole line. Guys like Victor Wooten, he doesn't have just one of his bass amps. He's got probably 3 of them in case one of them blows up on
Right.
tour or something. I might invest $10,000 worth of my gear and give it to you. Like, I have to see more than that returned back to me. Otherwise, this doesn't make any business sense. Like, I'm in the business to make money, to get my gear out there in front of a lot of different people. And if you're, I play bass in my church of 500 people every weekend. That's great, but at the end of the day, that's not going to translate to any sales.
Here's a good example of the manufacturers not being in touch with reality. How many Marcus Miller jazz basses did you sell? Ballpark it.
It was probably the number 1 selling Fender bass that I sold.
I would say, I wouldn't say number 1. It was
Yeah.
definitely the number 1. Well, it
At
was
that
tied,
price point,
tied with the Geddy Lee.
Geddy
those
Lee
two,
was a big
those
one,
two,
too.
but those are 2 very different basses as well.
Right.
But I remember selling a shit ton of both of those, like always
Right.
demanding that they are in stock.
Yeah.
And they did really well. Like, I know that they were selling the model. I know it wasn't a decision like them not giving him the time of day was not it just doesn't seem like a calculated decision.
Right.
It seems like a very corporate decision, and they have to set these parameters. I'm sure there was a meeting about this at some point.
Right.
So to see his departure a few years ago into Sire, and to hear him talk about the whole history behind that, that is a person who is really endorsing what they're playing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like, and the funny thing is, a huge part of his sound, at least before Sire, a huge part of that was not just the Fender itself. Obviously, it was his hands in there too.
Right.
But it was the onboard preamp.
Right.
That's something that Fender. It was a modified Fender instrument. So,
Right.
I mean, like,
they still sell the Marcus Miller, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
No, they
that
stopped.
Was that was discontinued.
They
was it discontinued?
Oh yeah, once he moved to Sire, that was it.
That was it. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was a big riff. I mean, like, God, look at what Sire has done. That's,
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's
those guys are
incredible.
blowing
And
up.
that's they definitely did it right by getting the having the right relationship. And I think the big part of it is that it's not just his name on there. His time and his effort and his influence and his input
Right.
was put into that,
Right.
and that reciprocated value of
Right.
input. It's why that's one of the major reasons why that's so successful.
Yeah, I think with Sire in particular, I think they just hit a lot of different things correctly. Like, obviously getting Marcus Miller and his input, price point is a huge
Right.
one. Like, they're a really affordable instrument for what you're getting out of it. You know, you get an active, well-made instrument with a lot of features on it. You know, and then, like, I think they've also seemed to have really good, like, customer relations too. With, you know, I've seen some people have, like, issues with maybe like a tuner breaks or something like
Right.
that. They're quick to get that stuff fixed and, like, listen, we'll take care of you, no problem. And they're constantly developing the line further.
It's a really small operation.
Yeah,
That's one of the reasons why the cost is so low. I mean, for the longest time, they couldn't bring on dealers.
Right.
And I was like pounding. I was hitting them up every couple months, like,
Yeah.
"Hey, when are you ready to have a dealer? Hey,
Right.
when are you ready to have a dealer? Hey, Tomon's a dealer. What's up?
Right.
Let's get this going." And you know, obviously we sold a shit ton of them, but I still wonder, like, okay, who's making these? Who is physically making this instrument?
Sure.
And how are they being treated?
Right.
We kind of touched on this last week. We touched on it a little bit in the post what are your expectations for a $1,500 instrument?
Right.
I just want to know, like, what kind of sacrifices are being made, because the quality is there for the money.
Right.
It's great. You can, like, there are plenty of professionals who play that instrument. Who is getting fucked by that instrument being made? I want to know.
Right.
You know?
Hopefully nobody.
Hopefully nobody. And it
you
doesn't
know.
seem like anybody is. It seems like after every conversation I've had with that company, they've been very transparent with everything, and they've been awesome to work with.
Well, I think
that's how my mind works. I'm like, it's so cheap.
Well, there's a gray
the cynic
area
in me.
there too, where you know, I'm not speaking specifically about Sire, but maybe, you know, your Apple iPhone or something like that, where these electronic products are being made in, you know, basically third world countries for people who work for $1 or $2 a day. But if you ask the manufacturer, they go like, people are lining up in these countries to work for us because there's nowhere else to make money, and they're happy to work for $1 or $2 a day. And you look at that, and I feel like totally conflicted, because, like, how could someone live on that type of wage and be happy to make that little of money? But at the end of the day, if they
exploitation of the
weren't
workforce.
there, like, they're not making any money at all.
It's
you know?
total exploitation
Yeah.
of the workforce,
Right.
man. But I say that
as
my
we
iPhone.
all have our iPhone sitting here, you know. But yeah, I think we are becoming more of a conscious buyer society,
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to, like, food products and, you know, where we're getting our meat and stuff, like, you know, factoring farming has been exposed a lot in the last decade, and other things like that, and where, you know, Nikes are being made, and
Right.
now we do have our first U.S. factory for Apple products, I think in Texas, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
yeah.
They're making the Big Mac computers. They just opened a factory. So like, hopefully that's a step in the right direction. Nobody wants to be exploited, and hopefully I'm sure Sire is doing what they need to do, and hopefully they're not taking advantage of people. But you do get a great instrument at
I
a
don't
great
get
price.
the impression that they are. It's
Right.
just
No.
it's just that I have to question those things.
Yeah, because you are getting a lot.
It's too good to be true.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, I mean, I think like, bass mods have been doing that for a long time too, where I feel
Yeah.
like you get a similar instrument for a really killer. That bass mods has always been for the last decade in my mind when people would have arguments about like getting a custom instrument and you don't need to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a bass. They would always point to bass mods. Like, look, you can get a really nice customize the instrument in a lot of different ways for $1,500.
Right.
You got a really killer instrument. So there's a couple people out there doing it, even on that smaller scale, like a bass mods or maybe a Sire, where like Fender has factories everywhere and employs however many thousands of people, so they can scale at a better rate than other people. But yeah, it's interesting. Hopefully we're all doing the right thing.
So back to the Clover.
Clover.
Yes.
What's the name of the model?
I think it's the Avenger. They have a series called Avenger,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Very smart to have like that with the Marvel universe and everything.
I
That's
think
pretty
it's from
wise
their
nomenclature.
Avenger series, but it's technically
Yours is the Thor.
no, no, it's the Jauqo III-X signature, but the same. They make it. The base is made right next to the Spectre Euro series
Okay.
Yeah.
and the NS design stuff. So it's definitely, and again you saw it's
Is it
quality.
in the Czech Republic?
Yes,
Yeah.
made in the Czech Republic. And the guys are really cool. They're very, 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 very easy to work with,
Mhm.
Yeah.
which for me
So
is cool.
you're getting a custom bass made by Clover, right?
A signature
It's
base.
a signature
Signature.
model. It goes into production. It's a few months behind, but
Right.
I'm not. I'm not mad at them, but
Right.
it's a few months behind because they got other things going on. But it'll be in actual production in a few months.
Cool.
That's great.
Yeah, January NAMM show next month.
Yeah.
They're gonna have a couple of them there,
Cool.
and I'm gonna have my own personal. I got a couple, no personal ones, but the bass that I'm playing is the same exact one that a person can purchase.
Right.
It's nothing different.
Right.
Figured tops. The electronics are cool. The Bartolini pickups. They're the oh my god, what series are those pickups? The B Axis.
Mm-hmm.
That's the series they are. But no, at the end of the day, it's all good, and I'm happy with it.
Good.
Yeah, that's important. Seriously, but like we were saying, you got to play what you like.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Well, man, we've covered a lot of ground in this 2.5 hours that we were talking, man.
It's been
Yeah.
2 hours and 12 minutes.
Yeah, that's a lot of ground. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming on.
No, thank you.
Really
guys.
appreciate it. You got a lot of really great stories to tell. I'm looking forward to seeing like the next wave of musicians that are influenced by you. I mean, like for the people who are listening and watching, Jauqo and I go back. I mean, God, like about I'd say 12 years ago. I saw there was a flyer in the Music Garage. It's this rehearsal
Local
studio
rehearsal space
in
yeah.
Chicago, and it's like an open jam session on the fourth
Oh,
floor.
yeah.
And I was like, the fourth floor? Like I didn't even know there was a fucking fourth floor. Is there a pool up there too? This
Right.
seems suspect. And I go up there, and it's this really nice area, and I hear like the music going on. And there's this dude just like thumping away, and I was actually in there. We were filming a music video for the band that I was in.
Oh wow.
And so I come in like a suit because we had to wear suits for this thing. And I got to jam with him and meet him and just kind of see him around and stuff. I mean, he's definitely been a fixture in the bass community, but also the Chicago music community. So
Sure.
it's really awesome to have you on here and hear
Thank
your
you.
stories.
No,
tell
I
them, man.
appreciate the time. Seriously.
Yeah.
But if you have any questions too, as always,
Alright.
hit us up in the comments. He's pretty accessible. He's got a lot of wisdom to share.
Yeah.
That's
Do you
for sure.
have like a website or a thing you want to send people to?
You know what? If someone, if someone they got some questions, they can they can reach me at my email address. I mean, I get a lot of emails.
Yeah.
So I'm used to it. It's jauqo@yahoo.com.
Very
There
easy.
you go.
Seriously,
that's
that's-
simple, easy.
Yeah, I get a bunch of emails from people from all over the world, and it's cool. It's the whole culture of, like you said earlier, people reach out to people,
Right.
you know, and I have a reputation for helping people, so it's all
Well,
good.
I mean, given your history, especially with Ornette, you'd be kind of a dick if you were standoffish. You know?
Oh yeah.
That'd be a major dickhead move.
Yeah.
If you were like, no, I'm good. I'm not gonna.
No, you know what? You have to share.
Right.
Yeah.
But the way things are today, you have to be a little more discreet with who you share with, because times aren't like they were years ago,
Right.
times ago. So, but it still comes down to sharing and learning and knowing how to choose the right people to share with, because you can't share with everybody.
Well, I don't know. Every time you used to come in Bass Club, you always rolled about 6, 8, 10 people deep with people. Every time you came
Yeah.
in, there was always a group, an entourage with you of, young
Oh yeah.
dudes who are like really into it. That I don't know if you're mentoring them or just they wanted
Well,
to be.
it's a combination of those things, and it's people that I've been knowing for years, and it's sometimes it would be cats coming through Chicago that I know, and they want to. It's a certain instrument or something they're looking for.
Right.
You guys have had it. Chicago music is
Exchange,
changing.
right.
It's like, let's go there.
Right.
And for me, it's all about. It's just for fun. I mean,
Right.
I'm a nerd at the end of the day.
Right.
You're in good company.
Yeah. And
We're the bass nerds. What
You-
what?
It's the base nerds.
right, and that's
You're
oh,
here.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, you gotta wait till the car stops moving before you get out of the
I
car.
know.
If there's two things that I know is that one, this is the Base Nerds podcast, and two, you gotta wait till the car stops.
And you know
before
what?
You get out of the
I'm
car.
an honest person. It's like I'm not faking it. It's like I was being honest,
Right.
But it goes back to what I was saying about when I would go in the grocery stores at night.
Mm-hmm.
It was peaceful,
Right.
And my brother would be like, "Why are you in the grocery store at night?" It's
That's when when I was a kid, my father and I would go to the grocery store at night. We would go to the Super Kmart, which was open like 24 hours,
Mhm.
and we'd start shopping at 10 o'clock at night because there was no one there. We could
Right, there's
take
no
our
one there.
time,
Man.
whatever, and I still love doing that.
So there was this website. It was like a kind of a dating website for Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm from. It was called Louisville Mojo.
Louisville Mojo.
Louisville Mojo.
Lol, how was it spelled? Lolville?
It's spelled "Go fuck yourself." I can say what I want.
LLOOUUW.
Should put that on the screen. And I like saw this. I'm like flipping through, and I see this like really attractive like not buzz cut, but really short haired lady, and I was just like, oh man, that's what's up. It's got like she's redheaded and got like a Molly Ringwald thing going on at the same
Nice.
time, and I just noticed her. And then one night, I get done hanging out with my friends. It's super late. I didn't really have anything to drink, and I was just like, you know what? I'm fat, and I got the munchies, so I stopped by this grocery store, and it's like this is like 2 or 3 in the morning, like 3 in the morning, and it's one of those like 24-hour grocery stores. There's nobody in there. There's like stocking everything at that point,
Right.
And I walk in I was like, I'm gonna get a fucking pizza, and so I go in the frozen food section, and I see this person like stocking up the section, and it's that woman, and I was just like, oh shit. Like,
I swiped left on you.
this is before swipe left.
He's like, I'm the greatest stalker.
Dude, this website I'm pretty sure had like Comic Sans font. It's one of those. But I was like, oh man. And so I was like, okay, well, it's on my way home. I'm gonna stop by here again at some point and
Right.
see if she's still there.
The
you know,
greatest
see if lighting's
stalker.
It was not a stalking. I just
That was
noticed. I noticed.
Admiring
I
from afar.
I don't know how it worked, but it was like kind of like the idea of like swiping right or whatever.
Right.
I like gave her a thumbs up or whatever,
Right.
something like that. And
Poked her.
it was returned, and then like
So
a
it's not
couple,
stalking
like,
if
a
she
couple,
returns.
this went on for like a month. I went there like maybe twice after that. For the same thing, I was just like, yeah, I want a pizza. I'm like, oh, let's see if that redhead chick's there, and
Right.
see her, and I ended up like going in and like he's like, hey, are you on Louisville Mojo by chance? And she's like, yeah, I am. And then we ended up getting on, like hanging out and doing stuff, and it was cool. I don't know why I brought that story up.
You're
You know what?
reminiscing of.
I'm sitting here saying to myself,
We're
what the hell is going on here?
I don't know. I felt like I needed to share that story.
But it's cool. Right.
I needed to share that
You know
story.
what? He had to get it off his chest.
It just reminded me. I don't know what reminded me of that, but I was just like, man, we did some stuff. We kissed. It was super cool.
Listen, before
Mark
we
is
go,
serious.
I do want to touch on. So like, everybody sometimes gets their gear stolen, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there have been, I'm sure I've gotten back when you were working at CME and I was working at Base Club, I'd gotten messages from you sometimes like, hey, this piece of gear got stolen, keep your eye out or whatever.
Yeah,
And,
like a customer would reach out to us.
Right.
We would share the news.
so Jauqo has a long history of like working magic, man.
The fucking recovery artist, man. I can think of 3 instances where I can think of 3 specific instances where someone had been ripped off. I had found out about this, and I'm like, you need to talk to Jauqo. And they're like, wait, the dude like with the earrings? I'm like, yeah, Jauqo.
That guy?
You gotta talk to him. He knows just trust me. Like what you got to do is you got to talk to somebody who knows everybody, and this dude knows everybody.
Right.
And usually within 24 to
24
48 hours,
Yeah.
the shit gets returned in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I mean, like you would what do you attribute that to? Like that your unique ability to recover shit like that.
People trusting me.
Yeah.
Even the person who is the victim and the person who may be the perpetrator or affiliated with the perpetrator. Because personally, it's in all honesty, everybody makes mistakes. That's not a cliche, it's a fact.
Yeah.
Right.
And people do stupid stuff, and people do things that are just downright bogus. But at the end of the day, you can say to a cat, just give the person their stuff back.
Right.
I had 2 bases stolen from me a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I remember seeing those on Facebook.
Yeah, in less than 24 hours, I got them back.
Right. Was the Pratt one of them?
No, it was it's my a luthier out of Malaysia named Mauricio Caduto.
Mm-hmm.
A 5-string bass, and Anthony Olinger.
Yeah, man. The Xylem.
Yes, my 8-string bass.
The Xylem bass, yeah.
And those were taken out of like your rehearsal spot or
Yes,
something,
the
right?
guy literally broke in there, and we're looking at him on camera. And I you know what? I hope he's listening to this or watching, because he knows that he came very close to really being in a lot of trouble, because
Right.
people all over the country was willing to do favors.
Right. Did you know him personally prior
I
to
didn't know him personally.
No?
What happened was he actually violated our community's trust.
Right.
I met him. I didn't know him.
Right.
I just happened to be in my rehearsal room, and somebody that he was working with who did not know what type of person this individual was.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And some kind of way my name came up. And he said, "Oh, Jauqo's upstairs." I didn't know the guy. He came in my room. The door was open. He knocked on the door, introduced himself. And he said he was a bass player, and we were talking. And he saw the 8-string bass. He was really fixated with it. And he said he had one. So I was like, who made it? Because, we know all the luthiers
Right.
for the most part. And he said, I don't remember the luthier's name. Okay.
Yeah. That,
And so I told one of my
Simon-
friends, something going on with this dude.
Right.
And it was on a Saturday. I had a rehearsal. And something told me to go down to the rehearsal Sunday morning. I go down there that Sunday morning, and there's security cameras throughout the building. And I noticed up under one of the cameras was moist. But I found out later it was oil, WD-40, because on the camera you see him spraying
Spraying
it.
it.
But I didn't put it together until
WD-40 doesn't seem like the
no.
thing.
So when I
maybe
got ready,
spray paint.
when I was about to enter my room, the door just came open. So I
Yeah.
stood back. I didn't enter. I stood back, assessed the
Right.
situation. So I go in and I notice one of my gig bags was open with a base hanging out of it. And I was like, "What?" And see, I was not the right person for him to steal from, because you're talking to someone who understands the mentality of those type of individuals.
Right.
A petty individual. I don't deal with petty people. The two bases that he stole, I knew he stole them because he was so passionate about them
Right.
when he was checking them out.
Same exact situation with that Sandberg that you helped me recover.
Right. It's
That was
like-
I didn't want to name the person's name, but
understand.
even you knew who it was.
You know, so it's like, you know, let's not get nobody in trouble. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Mhm.
But the individual who stole from me, I talked to him
Mm-hmm.
and I said to him on the phone, "What would you have done if you opened up that door and I was on the other side of
Right.
that door? What would have happened?" You know, and so he had to return the bases because we saw him on camera,
Right.
but he
You're
didn't want to
caught.
bring them to me.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't either if I were
You know, I-
caught. I'd be like, they're over here.
So
Go
what
pick
he
'em up.
did, he met one of my friends.
Yeah.
He said, you know, one of my friends went and met with him. I got the bases back. It was weird because on the A-string bass, he had took the knobs off and replaced them with some kind of cheap, ugly knob. I was like, what is wrong with this dude? You know, but again, I'm not a stool pigeon. I'm not going to tell on anyone. That's not my thing. But I don't want nobody going to the joint
Right.
when they can actually sit down. And let's all be men. Because whatever we do, especially if it's something you're not comfortable with, we got to face it at some point.
You got to own it.
You got to
Right.
own up to it. And I'm not saying a person's supposed to, commit a murder and then say, "Yeah, I did it." Because you're looking at a lot of time. You better not tell on yourself.
Right.
You know? But at the end of the day, he got his instruments back. Everyone that I've helped get their stuff back, no one went to jail. Because that was
Right.
personally important to me.
Right.
But these people, because there's people going around stealing instruments.
Right.
And some of them need to be dealt with accordingly, whatever that may be.
Right.
But this whole culture of stealing and taking people's instruments is just not cool.
Well, and an instrument is such a personal thing,
Mhm.
And, I see, like I know you're referencing that Sandberg patchwork bass, right?
Yep.
And like your 8-string bass, these are highly
Yeah.
unique instruments.
Yeah, I
that
mean it's pretty dumb.
Like,
you all had
it-
that Ken Smith.
Right, I
Ken
remember.
Smith.
Yeah, I remember that coming.
that one.
Oh, did you guys ever get that back?
As far as I know, no.
Right.
I don't know. I think that happened after I left Bass Club, or right before I left Bass Club. That had happened. I
Okay.
wasn't there when it happened.
Oh, okay.
He did
Mark
it.
was there. It wasn't me.
Jody
I
sang
know-
the bass.
You know.
Yeah.
Did he do
Listen, I am not a 6-string player. Okay, it was a 6-string
it?
Smith.
6-string
No, you
seller.
just made a mistake. You thought it was a 5, so he opened up the bag.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Man.
Yeah, so like these are really unique instruments. Like you could never play that bass live.
No.
and
Yes.
Oh, that's
you
ignorant.
can't
So-
sell it.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna find it. I know there's still like guys. I know Will's still missing that one bass. I think he left it at a gig or something like that. He has a jazz bass. I know he's been trying to get back for a couple years.
Oh yeah,
like
that's
that.
the one. Yeah, he left it
And
somewhere.
it went back and it was gone. So that's a
Yeah.
little different, but still.
Yeah, but it's out there somewhere.
It's out there, and I keep my eyes peeled honestly for
I
that
think that
instrument.
bass is gonna pop up somewhere.
I think so.
I
The
think
pickup design is what's really unique on
Right.
that thing, and I'll
Yeah.
catch that someday.
While
if I ever see it.
we're on the subject too, like while we've got the cameras rolling and everything, let's make sure we put an image of that bass that was
I will
of
definitely
Will's
put a little
bass.
picture of Will up there with his bass, and everybody
just
sees
a little
it.
extra press to
Yeah.
hopefully get
You
that
know?
I
bass
think
back.
it'll pop up. I think one day it's just like somebody's
Yeah.
gonna come across, because I got what's his name? Bear Williams, Larry Campbell. He's a local bass player. One of his basses got stolen. His signature bass, as a matter of fact, got stolen in Skokie. And one day I just I just happened. This is like almost maybe a year after it got stolen. I just happened to walk into the guitar store, and there it was.
Yeah. Sitting there.
I've actually got kind of a whopper that's very similar to that. There was this was in the news too. Like there were like blurbs on this one, so I can talk about it. What's that dude's name? He's in the band Down. He's got those like swirly Les Paul guitars.
Yeah.
Zach Wild.
Yeah. So Zach Wild did that Jimi Hendrix Experience tour, right? And he put it out there like, hey, like my Pelham Blue swirl was stolen,
this, yeah.
along with my jacket and stuff. You know, he put an APB on that. They never like they didn't recover it right away. And then maybe about, I'd say 2 or 3 months after that, I'm sitting downstairs in the bass shop.
Right.
And this guy's walking in with it in his hand. And I was just like, oh, maybe he's just going to try out like something. Like I didn't know what guitar inventory we had. And then I'm looking at it. I'm like, that's a Pelham Blue Les Paul swirl. And so I hit up my manager. I'm like, dude, wasn't this the fucking guitar?
Right.
Like the store manager. I'm like, wasn't this the guitar that Zach Wild? Like, don't you know like Zach Wild's manager? He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, come down to the repair shop. This dude just brought it down. So the guy comes down. He's like, I work for this pawn shop. Royal Pawn, I think it was.
Right.
And you know, we got this guitar, and we want to. I'm doing the Chicago accent because it's fun. We
Mike Ditka came in with this.
We got this guitar. You made fun of Louisville, so I'm gonna make fun of you, fucking Yankees. Right. We got this guitar, and you know, we want to just make sure we're gonna sell it. We want to make sure it's up to snuff, and we want to put all the right stuff on there. Can you help us out? And the repair guy's like, sure, man. And so like he knew right away too. He was like stalling him and stuff like that. And like the guy, like one of the sales guys comes downstairs and he's on the internet like looking up the article and stuff like that to get ready to present to the guy while we're on the phone with the manager. Like, hey, what's the fucking serial number? We get the serial number. We like, yep, this is the fucking one, dude. We got it. Like, what do we do? What do we like? Who do we talk to? What happens next? And so like. We like the cops got involved because there was a police report filed, and this is the number, this is the detective, and they came down there, and the pawn shop was freaking the fuck out because they didn't know what they had, and at the same time they were also filming like a pilot episode for a reality television show.
I think this is golden television,
and it's just like you didn't fucking know what it was,
right?
But we helped him recover, and the good thing was like it got back to the right person,
right?
You know,
yeah.
So it all comes back, hopefully. And
it's hard, man.
But with the advent of like with the musicians, like the real musicians, like the guys who are at this table right here, the ones who can't afford to just get another one, like the Zach Wilds of the world can, like the advent of like GoFundMe and stuff like that like definitely helps ease the burden.
Yeah, people get your trailer stolen or fire or whatever.
Yeah, the band Full of Hell, like they got their trailer stolen, and so a friend of theirs put up a GoFundMe for like $20,000. You know, and with GoFundMe you don't have to raise all of it. You just like that's just like
whatever you
this
get.
is about how much was stolen.
Did they get the 20?
They got $35,000.
Okay.
That's in like 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's because I think the nature that those guys have a reputation of being really good people.
Right.
You know?
Right. And putting out good music. And
it comes back. But friends. I know for a fact that no matter how much money you're given, musicians like that, like us, if our shit's taken, it doesn't matter how much money you give us back. An extension of us was taken away.
Exactly.
The violation is still there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the gear in this room, like if it burned, I could replace it. But there's a couple pieces in this room that, like, no amount of money would be worth me getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Or trying to replace it.
Yeah.
Real quick, I have a good theft story.
Yeah.
So I was working at Making Music at the time, and this guy comes in with a 12-string Paul Reed Smith, flame top, purple.
That's a expensive guitar.
It's an expensive piece. It's unique, and it's in kind of rough shape. Old strings, missing a couple strings. It's gross. Like somebody's been neglecting it. And he wanted to. It was two dudes. They wanted to sell it to Making Music, and Teddy, the owner of Making Music, like doesn't say anything to anybody.
Right.
He like goes in the back and he does some Googling, and he had recognized that this instrument had been stolen like 12 years prior.
Wow.
A long time ago. So he does some searching. Sure
I
enough.
love Teddy.
Sure enough, I can't remember the woman's name, but she was like, a moderate, successful singer-songwriter, and this was her custom one-off 12-string guitar. So Teddy comes out and goes, well, the police are on their way. You can do what you want. I'm not giving you back the guitar. You can wait for the cops. You can go, whatever. The guys end up staying. They came up, I don't know if the story's true or
Right.
not, but they said, somebody had owed them money for some work or something like that, and instead of paying them, they gave them this guitar. And that's how they were. So
Right.
the police show up. They talk to the police. They said, "Listen, I don't know. I'm sorry. Whatever. Take the guitar. Keep the guitar." So I end up taking, because like I said, it was in rough shape. I clean it, new strings, make it super nice for her. We get in contact with her. It blew up on Facebook. Like there's pictures with because we also at Macon, we were friends with a lot of the cops too. A lot of them were
Right.
players. So what Teddy did was actually called one of the cops we were friends with on his personal number, like, "Hey man, I got this guitar. What do I do?" And he's like, "Don't worry, I'll call. We'll take care of it." So
That's how cops talk.
right. So they show up. They got a picture.
Sorry, I was
Hey.
eating a donut.
Them cops
Right.
gonna beat y'all ass after this interview.
My dad was a cop. I know how to talk to cops. I'm not scared of cops.
So they show up. I got pictures with the cop holding the guitar and Teddy and everything, and then we end up sending it back to her. She wrote this, real long letter of how thankful she was. But it was such a, like 12 plus years later, remembering that this unique.
What color was it? Like
it was
brown.
It was purple.
Oh, we did say because I remember.
I remember that post.
It's on Facebook.
I remember thinking too, I'm like, that is a dumbass thing to steal too. But they had it for 12 years.
I remember. I don't play guitar, but I remember at NAMM, I stopped by the Paul Reed Smith booth, and they had a 12-string guitar.
Yeah.
And I took a picture with it because the guitar player I was working with, he had about 5 or 6 PRSs.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, look at this one. But I don't remember it being purple. It was like a nice. I think it was like a nice brown.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot of 12-string PRSs out
there to begin with, let alone a purple flame top.
Wait. Why are we still talking about guitars? This is the bass nerd.
Right. What is up?
What is this
Well, you
bullshit?
know what? We was talking about theft.
Yeah.
And we got to give props. 12-string PRS is a nice guitar.
It is a very,
Oh,
very
yes,
nice.
Yeah, a
instrument.
lot of PRSs are nice.
Yeah.
The nice basses, the Gary Granger.
Oh
bass.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
a
a
shit.
good model.
Killer.
Yeah.
I mean,
killer piece.
I'm not a fan of the headstock. I think that if there's one thing I could change about the bass, and this is notice, I know like the headstock is part of the signature of the luthier, and like it works for Paul. It's just I would play that bass if it had a different headstock. I'm that vain. I am that vain.
Yeah, that's deep. That's vanity as hell.
That's vain as hell.
Some people swear by. I know. I think you know Scott Pizzera, right?
Oh yeah.
He plays that Paul Reed Smith. I think he's got a 5, maybe.
Yeah.
And he swears by it.
It's a great
he's
bass.
Constantly posting on Facebook like.
Which model does he have?
He's got the Granger.
Oh,
I
Gary
think.
Granger.
Yeah.
Scott has. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
he's got one that he.
It is a
I think he also recently
badass
picked up a
bass.
Sarek too, if I'm not mistaken.
He did. I think he did. Yeah.
And I know he's a big Nordstrand fan, a couple other
Right.
makers too, but he swears by that PRS. He's like, I've never played anything more amazing. He's constantly posting about it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, we've done over 2.5 hours down here. I think we could wrap it up. Jauqo, thank you so much.
This
has
thank
been
you.
amazing.
Thank you, Mark.
I just want to tell our viewers to like, subscribe, share, all those things. I'd also like any listeners who have questions, please send them to us. I'd prefer them in a video format. Also, I feel like maybe we should start like I would like listeners to send in pictures of their rigs.
Ooh,
Their bass or their bass amps or their rigs or bass face, whatever. And we could either roast them a little bit or
Ooh, a little roasting. I can't do that though.
No, I mean,
I can't
it'll all be
roast
in
it
good
people.
fun, right?
I don't know. I like. There's something about I'm a firm believer that every piece of gear has its place. Even the fucking metal zone. I'll fuck with the metal zone.
Oh, dude, that was my pedal from the age of like 15
That's what I'm saying,
to 22.
Man. Yeah.
The MT2. I loved that pedal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that pedal
I
gets-
kind of wish I
gets
still
a lot
had
of
one.
flack.
But-
yeah.
I know how to roast a bass.
Well,
so.
yeah. So if you got a
That's
piece
it.
of gear, if you got an exceptional piece of gear you're really proud of, send it to us. We'd
And
love
we'll make fun of you.
to, or we'll probably support you.
No.
Yeah. So questions, comments, put it thebassnerds@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, share, write reviews on iTunes, and I think that's it. You got anything else you want to add, Jauqo?
No, I'm cool, man.
All right,
I
well-
appreciate the time. Seriously.
Well, I
Thanks.
definitely feel like this is the
Seriously.
first of many.
Oh yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
definitely have you
That's
back
a
in
fun.
here, or if you've got some people you think would enjoy this thing,
Oh yeah.
send
Oh,
them
yeah.
our way, or bring a buddy, and we'll have
Yeah.
4 dudes.
Right.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for listening.